Hello! I hope this is working now. And I do apologize for that. I'm not sure what happened. I have got to saved all the chat quickly from the previous stream. So, you know, hey ho. These things happen. I do apologize. Let's see. So go to the chat I saved. Hello, Peter Dawson. I'm glad you were fairly early. Did you get the AEW and Wyvern articles? They were sent at 10 a.m. Yes, I've got them, but unfortunately I've had all sorts of extra teaching slammed on me today, which I wasn't expecting, and a few other random things as well. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Carl Gasberg. Hello, Greg Satowski. Hello, Albert Sableski. Ian Carr. Gordon Collins. Hello, Thomas Vanderbilt. Hello. How confusing. Exactly 7:04 here. We change hours during the renters, but somehow it just never ends up with it in their timescale. Well, today I had twice the teaching I thought I was going to have, which is fun, and we've had our youngest fluffy research assistant has had to go to has had to go to the vets because he came down with pneumonia. So he was there yesterday, much of yesterday afternoon and evening, and has been there all day today. And it's been quite sort of worrying. After that, we also had a fence blow down, but we'll leave that to one side, which got fixed now, sorted out the post out. It's been a fun time. In car, who designed more operational World War II aircraft types? Then Fairey. Models were Seafox, Sea Swordfish, Battle, Fulmar, Albacore, Barracuda, and Firefly. I don't think anyone did more. Not sure. Hawker does quite a few. Hawker gets quite a few. Because they have Tempest, Typhoon. They almost have the Fury. And they have, of course, the Hurricane. And a few other things. Well, yeah. Hawk is probably the one that gets closest if anyone does. Let's see. Found an interesting record of 600 meters emergency band back in the 1970s. How an average day of radio at sea sounded in 1940 to 1990s. It's a whole bunch of trumpets and hours blasting, Morse code at Ekjava. Really amusing. Which fairies are we going to talk about? Swordfish Battle, all the ones in the interwar years. Plus there are going to be a few more in the later ones. Does Clark, sorry running late. Don't think I announced it early enough. That was me. In Cool, we in recompense we demand pictures of the assistant to your assistant. Well, I will post something this evening to the community. Yes, Jim Heaton, trainee assistant to the assistant. Those academic research pathways are harsh. They are. They're getting very harsh. We should be. Oh, well, I have a lot of fun doing this, and it's a good de-stress, and frankly, it's also a lot of fun, and disturbingly, and please don't pass it on, sometimes proves a more reliable income in that I can work out which day they'll pay me in advance than some of the universities which are supposed to pay me. But we'll leave that to one side. Very relatively specialized. Companies like Junkers, Heinel, Najima, Douglas Grunham made more varied types and had more in service. Potentially. Hello, DM Carpenter. Hello, DG40. Hello, Derp Squad. Hello, Greg Statowski. And Shoot Me. Hello. Right then. Let's go. Ooh. Right then. Sheesh. Osprey 28. Thank you very much. All praise the Blackburn. I'm not sure it's worth that much. I'm not sure even a Blackburn is. For the puppy from Paul. Thank you. He's going to be getting spoilt something chronic. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Felix B. Fairey without lag, hopefully. Hopefully, without lag. I'm watching the thing now and checking it's not lagging. It seems to be actually working better when I do it this way. I have no idea why. Let's see. Jeffy, I thought it was me and it was still night. It might be. Afternoon? Deeks25. Technology failed us once more. Basically, what happened was I had recorded videos last night and they will go live tomorrow. Because I recorded the long patrol last night, as I wasn't going to be asleep anyway, as I was up for in case the dog needed me. And so I recorded the videos last night. And it was in the higher setting I use for recording. If I use that setting for transmitting, it lags the whole time. So I have to take it down to a lower sort of resolution. Hi, Joseph. Hi, Sean Mack. Well, thank you, Osprey, and thank you, Paul from Chicago. And John Shrub. Hello. Caligen. Hello again. Right. Admiralty de Floof. How about a navalized Bolton Pool Defiant? A case for Albonia? That's called the Blackburn Rock, the navalized Bolton Pool Defiant. You take a fighter, which is actually a dive bomber, and you add on a very, very heavy turret. Yeah. Jeffy, my Casper John autobiography arrived today. You lucky, lucky man. DM Carter commented, then lost the stream. Frustration, not piratical. But why not both? John Shea, out of all the people to say the Blackburn is Osprey 28. Oh, yeah. Deeks 25. Oh, you're one of those people who enjoys their job. I do enjoy being a historian. I do admit I enjoy it sometimes too much, and it takes over my life rather too easily, and does mean I have to be careful because I can get so wrapped up in it that people, how do I put it? I become a workaholic very easily, and I have to be careful because occasionally it seems I forget people, and I don't forget them. I just get wrapped up in my work and think I've sent the messages and think I've done them, and actually sometimes I even have, and my phone doesn't send them on. But you know, that's life. I'll apologise. When you do something wrong, you have to own up. Right, so today's interwar fairies, and we'll go back again. We'll talk about lovely company that is Fairey Aircraft Company, and as we're last time with Blackburn, a major source is this book. It's Fairey Aircraft since 1915 by H.A. Taylor. It's a Putnam or Naval Institute Press classic. And it's really, really cool. Hello, Yogi Khan. DF. After they saw the lack of ability with the Defiant, could they not just use them as recon? Not really. They're really not fast. In fact, they're slower than most of the aircraft they're trying to intercept. Peter Dawson. Hawker Hind. Hart, Ward-XX from 1930s was still in service in Egypt, Iraq, Hurricane, Henley, Hotspur, Typhoon, Tempest. Yeah. Jeff Ealer, after Swordfish, my favourite ferry is the Firefly. Plan to go see one in Hamilton, Ontario, which is also the home of HMCS Hideout. Stop rubbing it in, it's cruelty. Thomas Randall, I love the Swordfish. It's so cute. It's so overworked and so incredibly flexible. You always get this radar problem, but the Swordfish carried multiple sets. Biplanes. Well, you know. These things work. Brian, hello Andrew Reynolds, and hello Aviator Enterprise, and Ian Carr. Rocks became target tugs. Rocks became targets. So, let's start off. And I was going to do a whole script for the company. But this book actually has a very good preface written by H.A. Taylor, so I'm going to borrow from this. Historical truth has always been a fairly elusive commodity, and especially so in the aviation industry, with security restrictions added to a natural wish to keep less pleasing facts and events from public knowledge. The real causes of development and production delays and failures are rarely stated at the time, and may afterwards be forgotten or overlaid by more important succeeding events. Fortunately, the earlier 50-year government-imposed constraint on the availability of much information in official records was changed in the 1960s to one of 30 years. so that existing files and test reports up to the early 1940s have been opened for inspection at the Public Record Office in London. Some of these have changed the emphasis and even revised some of the facts in relation to published statements or assumptions made earlier. Reading through the files has been an interesting, if arduous, and sometimes salutary experience. In preparation of this book, the availability of these files has been particularly important in providing background information about some events and decisions. I do love that's basically the example of what history is. I'm going to Fluff. Our best wishes to your fluffy research assistant on his commission to your stuff. Might we suggest Bark Royal as a nickname? There are so many nicknames, but currently, excuse the bookie mess in the room, but currently the fluffy research assistant is having a nice snooze. And the trainee fluffy research assistant should be home soon. And let's do that. And hopefully that's okay. That is okay. All right. So, Bristol had some good aircraft too. That's good. They did. So, as with many private business ventures, the formation of the Fairey Company in 1915 was the result of an opportunity grasped and risk taken at the right moment. A reasonably well-supported story has it that Charles Richard Fairey, then chief engineer of Short Brothers at Rochester, had been prevented from joining the Royal Naval Air Service when, after receiving in error his calling up papers, he made an attempt to join the Royal Flying Corps. He was told by Commodore Murray, or later Rear Admiral Sir Murray F. Souter, director of the Air Department of the Admiralty, that his most valuable contribution to the war effort was to design and build aeroplanes. Fairey is understood to have said, in effect, that he would be glad to do so if he could be given a contract and form his own company. There were needs for more aircraft and an expanding industry, so this proposition was agreed. With the approval of Horace and Oswald Short, a subcontract order for 12 Short 827 seaplanes was promised. That's how Fairey got started. From the very beginning, they were a fleet air arm company. And in many ways, they were more so even than Blackburn. We are going to get to the Fairey Flycatcher, don't worry. That is definitely near. I found some very cool pictures of the Fairey Flycatcher, and I intend to use them most salubrously. Right then. Thomas Arnold, they work? From wireless technician and transmitter operator's perspective, they were marvelous. They had the whole shebang. Yeah. Dylan Lelaire. Someone gave $100 to praise the Blackburn. It is very kind and generous, and slightly worrying. Jeff Wheeler, the Fairey Flycatcher. Yeah. In the service a very long time. In car, Bristol had good go-to. Blenheim, Bombay, Beaufighter, Buckingham, Brigand, and engines. Engines are really important from Bristol, and Bristol will be coming up in this. So, theoretically, genesis of Fairey should be F2. I should be sitting here talking about the F2 being the genesis of Fairey, how from this moment onwards they were building aircraft, they were doing well. The F2 is this glorious aircraft and everything goes right from that point, because that's the one which roughly equivalent is up with the Blackburn equivalent. But they don't. In fact, the F2 is pretty much able to be summed up as why. Why? It has two engines. It is made as light as physically possible. It is all sorts of weird things. And it just flops. Now, I would say partially the reason it flops is partially the reason quite a lot of Fairey's early aircraft flops is because they're very good at designing aircraft for a need which doesn't yet exist. This one is theoretically designed for long-range maritime patrol from air bases, but the trouble is it comes in 1917 when there aren't any air bases. They're using seaplanes and float planes and for long-range patrol, and it's decidedly not them. It's actually pretty darn complicated to maintain as well, so surprisingly, it gets kind of ignored. So the actual thing is its sort of stablemate is this little aircraft called Fairey number 10. Now, if you go around the internet, you will find no pictures of Fairey number 10. I've been hunting for them. I can find lots of pictures of Fairey number 9, its slightly smaller sibling, but none for Fairey number 10. That doesn't matter though. I had this book, and I nicked it. Now, Fairey number 10, there is a reason there aren't many pictures found for it. And we'll get to that later. But let's put it this way. Fairey number 10, really, if there is any genesis of Fairey, it's this aircraft. Because this aircraft is what means Fairey survives. This aircraft, Fairey number 10, is the aircraft which creates Fairey as we know. And it's Fairey number 10... who is the great grandfather of the Fairey swordfish, when you go back through the generations. Yeah. That many generations of aircraft go between 1917 and the 1933 build swordfish. Derp Squad, Duck Luck. I always thought the Defiant was terrible. For a gunner to be able to get a good shot, the Defiant needs to be level and straight. That makes an easy target for defensive gunners. Plus, it's pretty darn impossible for a pilot to get an aircraft to fly level and straight for that long, for the turret to actually turn. Have you tried to turn? Seen how long it takes to turn the power turret in the bottom pull Defiant? It's basically chug 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 chug. Stay there. Chug 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 chug. Keep flying level and straight. Chug 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 chug. We're going to make it soon. Engage. Hello, hello, yes, hello. You thought I was being very weird. Okay. Sorry. Fluffy Research Assistant was worried about how weird his papa was being. No, it took me way too long to navigate through various other videos and will be live in 2 days videos. It tried to put me in the chat of... Like, no, I don't want to be in live chat of a stream you'll be not do for 2 days. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why that's happening. Fairey Fox, biplane bomber. Yeah. Sorry about that, Melanie, 16040. Let's see. In car, Fairey aircraft appear when manufactured to have flown out of what is now London Heathrow. Some of them did, yes, didn't they? From the perspective of someone fairly unfamiliar with Fairey aircraft, other than the obvious ones, they seem to be an aircraft that are not the best, but just get on with it regardless. Pretty much that is Fairey's history. They are very reliable. They will, on stats, not be the best, but they will always be very reliable and very rugged. They are very solidly built. In fact, you could argue a Fairey is the closest thing aircraft have in this period to a Volvo. Jeff Elop, the Fairey 3 beats the Flycatcher for longevity, though. Born in World War One and retires in 1941. Yeah. Jeff, you're sort of giving away the game of Fairey number 10. We'll get into that in a bit. Osprey, it'd be interesting to see what they would think up if you slipped them a Wasp major radial engine. Yeah, it could be interesting. I'd prefer to slip it to Bristol and see what they'd make of it. Take care, Stafford Thompson. That's good. Fairey number 10 was top secret. No one was allowed to know of its existence, not even the pilots. This had the unfortunate effect of making training interesting. That wouldn't have surprised me. No, Fairey 10, I'm still not sure why there are no pictures. Manly 1640. Oh, imagine a carrier of World War I vintage through squadrons of those F2s. I just got a mental image of this. What could it have done at Jutland? I honestly don't know if they'd still been in the air at Jutland. They can carry 2 Lewis guns. They can't carry anything else, really. They are very underpowered for their size. What exactly were you just demonstrating, by the way? The Bolton Pool Defiance turret. Thomas Vanderbilt. Yes, airplane technology between 1920 and 1935 exploded insanely. Yes, it does. And part of that is down to this. This is another one of the F2. I just thought because people don't know enough about it and because it isn't Genesis, I would do a picture of it. There you go. Does anyone here really want to take that up in the air? I'm just asking for... I don't know what reason. I would hope you'd all say no. I'm honestly not sure about that undercarriage and the design, but it is a 3-seater, which does become standard for Fairey. There are some crazy people out there. Anyone wants to build an F2 and try and fly it, good luck to you. Lionharder, there are some crazy people out there. DM Carter, that Thomas of Volvo 6 years ago was a one-shot, non-reliable white-tailed deer slayer. Yeah, but you survive. Melanie 64, the turret was powered by something other than humans. It had all sorts of things built into that turret on the Bolton Pool Defiant. But that's what I'd fly that. I mean, when I say fly, it would probably lift off, turn over, crash, and burn, but it would have flown momentarily. Possibly. Okay, so these are the sources today. Already shown you the Fairey book. Specifications file, of course. And... stay down. You're very cute, but I'm not going anywhere. Good boy. This one as well have been used by W.A. Harrison. It's a good book. It is a good book. Lionheart X-Ray. So is this your way of giving thanks to the Fairey Swordfish? Happy Thanksgiving from the US. Well, happy Thanksgiving to my American listeners. And to an extent, yes. It is a bit of swordfish fun. Do you consider falling to be flying? Probably not. Calvin Ginsberg, if you find a snooker table, which hole... yeah, that's a nice idea. Alright. So here are Bristol engines, aeroplane company engines. Now, there are Bristol Aeroplane Company, who make the Pegasus, and then there's Bristol Siddeley, who make the Pegasus for the Sea Harrier. So, you know, basically, Bristol like to make engines called Pegasus, and they do very well for them. Do very, very well. So we have a Sea Harrier mentioned, and the same thing as a Swordfish, because their engines are called have the same name, and they're made by the same company. Now, Bristol are, of course, famously associated more with Fairey than they are with their own actual aircraft. And they provide the Blenheim, the Beaufighter, all these things. again, one of the fun I often have with students is going, do you know that it was the same company that made engines as made the aircraft? I go, why? Why would they, that's like Rolls-Royce making their own planes. Well, when the engine was the most important piece of an aircraft, because everything was about power to weight ratio, so you wanted to make the aircraft as light as possible and the engine as powerful as possible, it made sense. And also, it meant the companies knew exactly what they were buying, and the engines would definitely suit their aircraft. And they could be designing their engines for their aircraft. And they did, regularly. Very good engines. In the case of the Bristol engine series, they do a lot of them. Their engines include the Cherub, Lucifer, Jupiter, Titan, Mercury, Neptune, Pegasus, Phoenix, and Hydra. They do have some really interesting names. That was the original series of engines. And those are all, to an extent, build up into what becomes the Pegasus. Although the Pegasus is not the last in that line, there is a Phoenix and then a Hydra after it. The Phoenix, the Bristol Hydra, was a 16-cylinder twin-row radial engine, and you can be scared by the idea of it. Then they decide to start with a sleeve valve series, and so they have the Perseus, Aquila, Taurus, Hercules, and Centaurus. Centaurus, of course, is that really, really powerful engine, which, how do I put this politely? If you'd had the Centaurus around, how do I make it point? Okay, so the Centaurus, when it's working properly in its base model, that sort of really, really works. The Centaurus 7, you're talking 2,500 horsepower at 2,700 RPM, and they are very, very good. But also, those engines weigh 2,695 pounds dry, which means they would weigh as much as some of the aircraft you're talking about at this point. In the beginning, the Pegasus dry weight is 1,111 pounds, or pretty much half a ton. So, that engine up at the top of the screen and the corner weighs half a ton. They are a massive. When your aircraft are a maximum of about 3,000 pounds to 3,000 to 4,000 pounds, all up weight, a unit component which weighs 1,000 pounds, i.e., a quarter of their weight, is a very major investment. This decision. Not sure they'd ever did call a car called Pegasus, but did some pretty oddball cars. Bristol engine car. Bristol engines started with the Jupiter. No, Bristol engines start with the Cherub. Believe it or not, the Bristol Cherub, a 2-cylinder air-cooled aircraft engine. It's very, very fun, and it's 32 horsepower. No, Jupiter does actually. Jupiter comes into service earlier on an aircraft, so that's known earlier. But the Cherub was actually started work on earlier. Fun times. Sorry, reading my own notes wrong. Eesh. Good lord, the Jupiter gets used a lot. Nick Ashwell Rice, Rolls-Royce do it with ships anyways. Not. They have a design bureau. They don't do it. They don't do it with shit design. Build their ships. In car, Curtis also made engines and aircraft. Yep. Descott, what would happen if someone built a Swordfish got the wrong Pegasus? A VTOL Swordfish and a horrendously underpowered Harrier? Well, you'd have a Harrier which wouldn't take off at all. And you'd have a Swordfish which wouldn't need its wings. Could be interesting. Captain Gasman, re-aircraft engine. Yes, to an extent. Some otherwise mediocre Italian planes, when got the Daimler-Benz engine, became maybe the best Axis single and piston engine fighters. Yep. You get a reliable engine, you've got a good time going. So anyway, oops, got to check my pies. Good luck with the pies. It's cruel to bring up a pecan pie and not send me any, but I'll you know, I accept it to come by the post. Dirt Scott, an aircraft manufacturer making engines also makes sense for economic reasons. Making your own engines gives you more profit than buying them from another company and their margins. Yes, it does. It's one of the reasons why I find the modern capitalist system sometimes doesn't really make sense to me, because you're basically saying at every level that every level should be making profit if you're a company which farms out components to other companies to build. Derp Squad and Deeks25, I will combine your question as, yes, it is mildly weird to want to see a VTOL Swordfish, but I also would like to see one now, and you could certainly fit a lot of them on an aircraft carrier if you didn't have to worry about wings. I'm not sure if you can carry a bomb then, but no, a torpedo, but you know, it could be worth it. Basically, radial engines, though, are incredibly reliable, and Pegasus and Siddeley Armstrong are the two best companies making them. Bristol, I mean, and Siddeley Armstrong. The Pegasus is possibly the most well-known and most reliable engine of World War II. And I can say that because if you look at the flight hours versus maintenance hours, that's where it really starts to come to its own. Pegasus is a really, really reliable engine. And I often wonder, and this is going to sound strange, if half the strength the British managed to have in World War II is their engines might not have always been the most powerful engines, but because they were more reliable and required fewer maintenance hours, they managed to get more operating capability out of their aircraft. So they would sustain higher numbers operational, which in turn means you have more aircraft available. And okay, so you can go, I have an amazing aircraft available. Let's say I have 6 amazing aircraft and you have 6 average aircraft. But my 6 amazing aircraft require 4 hours of maintenance for every 1 hour of flight time, and I have the same number of personnel as you do. Whereas your aircraft require 2 hours of maintenance per every hour of flight time. Well, that means if I've only got one person available to maintain each aircraft, and as you've got the same, my aircraft will be airborne for 6 hours a day. I'll have, let's see, my maximum I would get is 5 hours a day out of my aircraft, probably. And you would be getting 8 hours a day out of each individual aircraft. So I'd have 30 hours of air cover for a day. You would have 48. And those extra 18 hours start to add up on day 1, 2, day 3, day 4. Many things. I thought Swordfish were stalled. They were, but that was mostly thanks to the huge amount of lift they had. Right. Calm guys. Radials. Inline engines were actually behind radials until the glycol coolant, which allowed smaller radiators. Yes. And you have to remember, the radiators, etc., added to the weight. So until radiators and engines get powerful enough and radiators get small enough, it does affect your choice. If your power to weight ratio is what's going to govern what you can carry and what you can fly off and your operational things, is the extra weight useful? And radiators, even glycol cooled engines, require more maintenance as a rule per flight time than radial engines. Greg Salsey, that was part of the problem in the ME-262s. The engines only last a few hours before overhauls. Yep. Nick Ashford, the UK prioritised serviceability above almost everything. Look at RAF versus Luftwaffe Typhoon serviceability. The Germans only had 4 combat cable airframes. It helps. Due to fusion, reliability is like Goring's comment. After the war, I'm buying a British radio. At least then it'll always have something that works. Well, this is the point. Whenever people are talking top trumps, we usually end up people going, "Oh, this access equipment is far better." Da 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 da. You sit there and go, "Yeah, but it only works if there's a F in the day of the week." Whereas the Allied equipment doesn't look as good on paper, but it works every day of the week. Nutty Apple 1. Do you know any YouTuber doing Canadian history, or like you doing it for the UK, maybe for the Canadian Navy? Not at the moment. I'm always hopeful to find them. I'll have a chat with Sam McLean. See if he knows anyone. DM Calder, maintenance operational ratio. The same applies to German Mark IV to Mark VI tanks versus simpler, less maintenance intensive Allied tanks. Yep. 1964. Okay, mental image refined. Carrier with squadrons of Vimy or Gotha at Jutland, and some form of armor-piercing bomb converted 14-15 shell. You've spent... Why are you thinking these things? You spent too much time listening to me in Dragonfell. Anyway, so there will be a link appear down below in the description when this video has been live for a bit. In fact, I'll go track it down now and put it in there. To this wonderful article. And it is a really lovely article all about aircraft design and construction. And frankly, I've used it as my source for the fabric construction discussion, because one of the things I'm often talked about is, why were they using fabric construction? Why did they do this? Well, because it made sense. Because at the time it was viable. Some of my students, and I love them dearly, do seem to have this idea that aluminium comes into this world ready formed and ready easy to use. I'm not sure why they think that. I have tried to dissuade them of this opinion, but they do. And that's not really necessarily a bad idea. It's just sort of not really going to happen. Because, as said, it really isn't the case. So I have picked a lovely picture of a Vickers Wellington, which shows off its various, the internal design and internal structure. That's geodesic internal framing. And that was quite a common framing style that's used for aircraft fuselages. So they're these sort of wicker constructions almost of wood. And wood is very, very good at this point. Another question that comes up is, okay, when they did have aluminium, why did they take that? Why didn't they all adopt it immediately? Well, because they were very good at using wood by that point. Their wood was considered very reliable. They had very good materials to cover the wood. They had very good shaping with the wood, and they were still learning how to use the aluminium. So you get a while where you get aluminium aircraft coming in, or aircraft being partially aluminium, partially fabric covered as they're coming in. And also, aluminium is light, yes, but it's actually still not as light necessarily as a wooden construction. You might well have aluminium tubular frame come in with still having the wood around the tubular frame because it strengthens it. So standard construction involves a spar and rib wing, wire-braced box girder fuselage, wire truss and strut supported by plain wing cells, and sealed fabric skin stretched over the airframe. That's the standard. From World War I onwards, really, until about in the mid-1940s. Incar, RF had all sorts of problems with World War II problems with some engines. The Rolls-Royce Peregrine and Vulture, Napier Tiger, Sabre. Yes. But the Royal Navy's engines mostly were quite good ones. The Royal Navy managed to mostly get the good ones. Not quite sure how. Possibly because they strip them down and rebuild them quite often. Dev Squad, bauxite is a lie. No, it's useful. Greg Salty, take them to a workshop and have them make something out of aluminium. They'll learn fast. That is pretty much what we do. But the trouble is they get into those labs. Usually they're in those labs quite a lot at Kingston. It's one of the good things about us as a university that I work at. But at the moment, of course, we can't do labs because of COVID. So they're not getting that sort of same sort of things. Okay, Adrian, don't you have a lot of engineering students? I do have a lot of them. I like them. They're good students. Don't worry, they don't leave my class not knowing this stuff. It's just the quality of television. It's like on television when you're watching a television program, a scientist is a scientist of everything, not just a specialist. I also remember Samantha Carter from Stargate seemed to have about a bazillion PhDs, the amount of knowledge she had. And it's just to save money because you can't afford the staff you'd have to have in real life. Because that many actors, and plus it would get confusing for the audience to watch. So it makes sense. It's a televisual representation, but it's not really reality. Coming out, reactors equipment. In defense of the Germans, one must keep in mind that the Spitz needed like 13,000 hours to manufacture, flew with US Hamilton screws and US high octane fuel. A 109F needed like 4,000 hours to build and ran on 87 or so octane fuel. Yes, but wasn't as beautiful. Money 6040. Would they cover the wood in latex, or would that not come until later? They start off with a sort of fabric covering. It gets into all sorts of things later. They try everything. Wood, Buckingham points. Wood doesn't need mining, and trees grow in lots of more places than bauxite is found. Yes, that's the other thing. You can find wood in the UK. Hence, the Mosquito was so beloved. It was one of the easiest to build in terms of getting the components you need to build it. Same with the Hawker Hurricane. Jeremy, will we return to Engine Discovery and Barracuda and its X time? Yes, we will do. Well, we probably won't get to Barracuda today. Mainly because I haven't got the slides in this one, because I don't think we'll get to those slides today, because we've got so many slides to go through already. But what I have done and will do is Barracuda will be coming up in a sort of special thing, which will appear probably Saturday. Sure, yes, problem. No, wait a minute. The best aircraft World War II plus flown from aircraft carriers. Well, that's a Fairey Swordfish. No. Peter Dawson, if you're using wood, are you making a vampire jet? Oh. Yeah, you have to be very careful with the clutch when you're driving most of the German tanks. Sorry, I'm going to have to move this just a tad so I can reorientate my position so my fluffy research assistant can get the patting he needs. Oh, caramba. I know. Demanding research assistant he is. Very, very demanding. Servicing of biplanes was originally a combination of stretched canvas and doped Irish linen. Yes, there was also some which had a covering in paper, which is why in 1910s, I think it's in 1917, the British government ordered an investigation of Chinese imperial armor practices because they'd heard about paper armoring and they wanted to see if there was any secrets in it which might make the frames of aircraft better. It's a fun time. Gone Cons. I think the geodetic construction owes its origins to airships and then moved across with Barnes-Wallison's aircraft. Actually, it's one of those things which starts off in both. In that you have airships going for it because of airships needed for rigidity, but also a lot of aircraft are going for it because, again, it helps them rigidity. Once you start going, I don't want to be a box shape. I want to be something other than a box shape. So while aircraft are still very much a box shape in World War I, they are. But the moment they start going, we're going to have curves to make us faster because we've got a wind tunnel and we need curves. The geodesic starts to come in. So it's not nearly, but it's not Barnes-Wallis, unfortunately. There's so much he can be given the credit for, but not that one. In Card, I managed to make World War II drop tanks out of compressed paper. Potentially. Calm Gasberg, Calm Gasberg, I think I missed part 1 of your point. I have no idea where it's gone. Nope. Kaden, there was also issues in the lack of petrol, so they have very little training once they got in the machines. Right then, so where does Fairey number 10 become? Well, Fairey number 10 is actually the first of this aircraft type, the Fairey 3. And again, I've gone for the book. But I wanted to give you an interesting idea in that the Fairey A has a wingspan of 46 feet 2 inches. But after the Royal Navy's been operating them on carriers for a long time, the Fairey F Mark IV, the latest variant, last variant of the Fairey 3, has a wingspan of 45 feet 9 inches. Now, what does 3 inches loss mean? A lot. it makes it just that bit easier to move around in the aircraft carrier. It really matters, okay? It's one of those things, when I'm talking to people, go, but it's just 3 inches. It's just 12 centimeters. It doesn't matter. It does. It just makes things just that bit easier to move around in hangar, and that matters because if you can maneuver around in the hangar easier, you can more easily maintain aircraft. You can also more quickly and easily move them into positions where you can arm them and send them up again to be flown. All these things matter, so it's always a balance. Also interesting, though, is, and here's a really good illustration, the Fairey A has an engine which is a 260 horsepower Sunbeam Maori V2 V12 piston engine. The Fairey F Mark IV has a 570 horsepower Napier Lion 11 W12 water-cooled piston engine, driving a 2-bladed fixed-pitch propeller. Mm-hmm. And the difference in speed? Well, not that much. Really, not that much. Why not? Because whilst the Fairey 3F is slightly smaller, slightly longer, slightly smaller, and all sorts of things to make it easier to move around, it's also slightly heavier. And it carries a lot more. It really does carry a lot more. And that makes it sort of more difficult to... how do I put this? Again, it's power to weight ratio. And the power to weight ratio stays fairly even along the Fairey 3 development. Hello, Juno111. 21 today. Happy birthday. So you might spent many winters inside a hangar stitching wings and fuselages. Fun times. High from the applying a dope. Many layers. Peter Dawson. Trusses were in Blackpool Tower 4th Bridge Act for structural integrity for a long time. Yeah. There are lots of examples. Engineers have been doing it for a while, so these things are available. Don't worry, Blue Shirt Buddha. Yeah. Sorry, just got a message that someone's having trouble getting the link. Don't know why I looked at my phone then. Don't normally look at the phone while it's transmitting. She must have been thinking very hard of me. Hello, Steve White, and hello, Blue Shirt Butter, if I haven't said it already. Don't worry about being late. Now, the Fairey 3F. Now, why is the Fairey 3F Genesis for the Fairey Company? Well, this is why. 975 built in total. And that's not including the Gordons and Seals, which are variants of it. With those, it goes up to 1,252 aircraft. In other words, for quite a lot of the interwar years, this aircraft is the most common in-service fleet air arm aircraft in the Commonwealth. Now, as you can probably tell, the trainee assistant, Fluffy Research Assistant, has just got home, and the Fluffy Research Assistant is now whinging at the door because he'd like to go see him. He can't because the trainee's back from the vets, so I do apologise for whinging. I'm not being cruel to the dog. I am merely having to keep him up here so that the little puppy can rest, because he spends, whenever the puppy's been back here since he's been ill, being a very good big brother, our dog spends most of his time going over him. And, you know, the puppy needs to sleep without being able to look up and go, "That's a head as big as me." Shawnee S. Eric Winkle Brown landed a Mozzie on HMS Indefatigable on 25th of March 1945. Yes, he did. And it survived very well. Eric Winkle Brown does a lot of very successful things. But so half the time you think it's because he's Eric Winkle Brown. But Scott, when Drac brings me there, he has a very, very special, highly individual to him ringtone, which is basically the dry dock theme music. Right. So the Fairey 3 is pretty much naval aviation in that period. In the 1920s, at the end of World War I to, well, for most of the 1920s and 1930s. What I love about this is that in this book, you can tell how important the Fairey 3 is because well, it takes up all of this. That's the Fairey 3, A to D. Then there is the section for the Fairey 3F, which is all of that. It's a lot of aircraft about them. And pretty much the important ones, from our perspective, is the Fairey 3D. Now, why does the 3D matter? Well, for starters, it's the first one you can see in full perspective. Sorry, couldn't resist the joke. But when land has been made for the conditions of the era in which it was made and operated, the 3D can be considered to be Fairey's most successful aircraft. For example, they managed to sell 227 in peacetime. If you can sell 227 of an aircraft in peacetime, you're doing pretty darn well. Especially in the peace you have when this is being sold. It served pretty much everywhere in the world you can think of that the Royal Navy, Royal Australian Navy, Royal New Zealand Navy went. The Royal Netherlands Navy, Portugal. Portugal even had a special long-range one, which managed to get itself, well, have a crash, but it does do a nice long-range trip first. Let's see. Flights operating Fairey 3Ds, number 441, 1924 to 1929. Le Caires, Califra, and Malta. HMS Argus on the China station had flight number 44, 1924 to 1930. Leon Solent, HMS Vindictive, China station, number 44 TO, 1925-1928. 28. Calorifina, Malta, HMS Hermes, China station, number 443A, 1925 to 1928, Le Caires, HMS Furious, Home Fleet, number 443B, Le Caires, number 442, 1926-1930, Le Caires, HMS Hermes, China Station, Seaplane Training Flight. Pretty much the 3D goes everywhere. Most outstanding and best known operation in which the 3Ds were involved was the first long-distance flight by the Royal Air Force, and the first to South Africa, made in 1926 by the Cape Flight, which had been formed at Norfolk in November 1925. 7 aircraft, S-1102 and 1108, were allocated to the flight. In the event, 4 aircraft, S-1102 to 1105, were involved, with 3 others, S-117 1077 and S1107 and number N578 being held in reserve in Egypt, Kenya, and South Africa in case of trouble or accident. In fact, the original 4 aircraft completed the whole out and home journey, with only minor troubles, such as the loss of a wheel on landing in Aswan, the replacement of 2 propellers and a magneto charge. The same Lion VA engines, though completely overhauled at Pretoria on the return flight, were used throughout. The Cairo-Cape Cairo journey of some 11,000 miles was made with the 3Ds as land planes, but they were also fitted with floats that would occur in Egypt for the final journey home to Leon Solent. Whole operation, which had been officially described earlier as being designed as a means of showing flag and providing the RAF experience of long-distance flying, was completed between the 1st of March and 21st of June 1926. When the seaplanes arrived at Leon Solent. The Fairey 3D is pretty darn cool. It's not the only one, though. The 3F is also does so much stuff. And really, we're talking a bit of it out of service, because we should be talking about the Flycatcher before we get to the Fairey 3F. But I always think that it's best to deal with types of aircraft as they grow and grow, and in that case, we're sticking with the Fairey 3s, because the 3F, well, if you have a look at the numbers here, you'll notice that the 3F alone accounts for, well, 400... It's 500, and that's 34. So 534 plus, well, 534 between just the Mark III and Mark IV variants, but add on the 91 other ones, and you get to 625. Of the 975 aircraft were Fairey 3Fs. Remember, how's the doggy? I think he's okay. Seeing as they've taken the fluffy research assistant away, I'd presume he's well enough to have company. Yeah, I do wonder if effective armor using modern techniques can be made out of paper. It would be interesting, but quite scary. Yep. So anyway, like fairy designs, something graceful. Well, except for the swordfish, but even it had a certain flair. Yeah. Honestly, the Fairey Free, and that's a Fairey Free F of the Royal Canadian Air Force. It's an interesting aerodynamic shape. It is. In-car, all water-cooled engines on the Fairey Free F. Fairey Free. I know. This is one of the interesting things. They are back. Fairey Free ferries are known as this company associated with the radial engines of the Pegasus, and it's Blackburn which use radial engines. Fairey don't. We'll see this as we go through. You will not rarely see a radial engine up until you get to the Swordfish. Suddenly, radial engine. Despite designed initially to be to the two-part specification of 1924, which called for a three-seat spotter reconnaissance aircraft for the Fleet Air Arm and for a land-based two-seater general-purpose aircraft for the Royal Air Force, the 3F was a much tidied-up development of the 3D. Among other changes, it had an all-metal fuselage and later an all-wing structure. Now, we have the specification, so let's look at the specification. Design of the Fairey Free F was according to the Air Ministry specification summary undertaken to a requirement for a general service seaplane. Summary then notes that the specification 1924 is superseded by specification 2727 for a general service land plane. Firm's records state that the Fairey Free F was initially designed to a two-part requirement. Design of the two-bay, unstaggered biplane with equal span and constant chord folding wings was a direct development of the Fairey 3D, having an all-metal fuselage structure, a fully cowled engine, a modified tail unit, and an improved undercarriage to meet the deck landing requirement or for an increased rate of descent. The prototype 3F N198 to contract number 57704-925 first flew on the 19th of March 1926. A very auspicious day. It was first flown to Hamble and then to Felixstowe, where it successfully completed its flight testing as a float seaplane. Again, Napier Lion engines. They would be powered by Napier Lion 5A or VA, Napier Lion XIs or XIAs. 12-cylinder, broad-arrowed, liquid-cooled engines, though a few, as recorded later, were differently powered for other users and purposes. Armament for both the Fleet Air Arm and the Royal Air Force consisted of a single fixed forward Vickers firing gun in a blast trough on the port side, and a Lewis gun on a Fairey high-speed mounting, and a bomb load of more than 500 pounds could be carried. That sounds very, very similar to what will be fitted in terms of weaponry to the Swordfish later on. Jack, for me, there are hints of the future Fulmar shape. Potentially. I can see that, Jamak. Most of these aircraft, at this point, designed by Fairey for a Fairey, are the work of a gentleman called Jeffrey William Hall, along with Fairey himself. So, if you don't see a designer listed, usually that means that Sir Richard Fairey, I think his first name, is the guy who designed it, or led the design team. When finally inserted as Fleet Air Arm, the Free F eventually served on board every British aircraft carrier of its period, as well as on all naval air stations at home and abroad, and as a catapult floatplane with almost every warship. The Mark III-B was fully stressed for catapulting, and the first of this final variant for the FAA was flown from Norfolk on possibly the company's Neodrome at Harmsworth on 6th of June 1930 by Flight Lieutenant C.S. Stannelad, who had joined Macmillan at the beginning of that year and afterwards took part in the catapult trials. The last Mark III-B was delivered on 10th September 1932, and the last 3F in Fleet Air Arm service was probably a target tug based at Hong Kong before the invasion by the Japanese in December 1941. The 3F had been declared obsolete by the Fleet Air Arm in 1940. Only in 1940 was that declared obsolete by the Fleet Air Arm. It's a good aircraft, and it does a lot of testing. One of the interesting things about the 3F is that it gets involved in quite so much of the operations that are going on. It's also quite important in that 3 of them are used to be the Fairey Queens, the Queen Bee test targets that they fire their AA armament at. And it's no surprise that they choose the 3F, because it's very maneuverable, but also quite good in the control surfaces. So, radio control wise, you can do quite well with it. Gaharman, can you increase the slide size? Quite happy to. Hopefully that works. Greg Sarcy, so many built and so much service and no mainstream 172 kit. Don't get me started on how many kits are missing that should be there. They are very good little aircraft. Although they're little in comparison to the A variant. But as you can see, there are only 50 Fairey 3As built. So this is the aircraft which keeps the company going. Melanie 6040, let me guess, only declared it obsolete due to spares availability. This is the Royal Navy and Fleet Air Arm. Pretty much it's declared obsolete due to limited amounts of pilots going around and observers and aircrew and maintainers. They actually do have spares for it, and interesting enough, some of the spares for the Fairey 3F, because they have enough similarity, do get used for maintaining swordfish in the Middle East and Near East. Now, the Fairey Pintail. Ba-da-dum. Sorry, couldn't resist. Nick Waters, Gordon and Sealed, and different names but grouped with 3. I'll be getting to those, but they are pretty much... Fairey decides that some of its later versions of the 3F will be called... have names. And no, I do not know why they call one the Fairey Gordon. I have no idea. Who comes up with the idea of calling an aircraft the Fairey Gordon? Gordon Bennett. I have no idea of that one. Dylan Lilar. The Fairey Pintail does not spark visual joy. The Fairey Pintail doesn't spark visual joy in anyone. The Fairey Pintail is one of those aircraft which you go, how did you even come into existence? We have to go back in time, believe it or not, in this book to find out how. So, and it doesn't get much in this book. It is honestly an aircraft which I think this guy, historian of Fairey, would like to forget. First entirely new post-war aircraft, or post-World War I aircraft, produced by Fairey, and was the Pintail, a fighter reconnaissance seaplane designed and built consistently with the Parnell Puffin to meet requirements of the RAF specification 21, dated 20th May 1919, for a 2-seat amphibian which could be operated to and from land or water and from carrier decks. 3 individual prototypes were built, differing only in the form of the amphibian gear and the length of the fuselage. However, they don't get used. They really don't get used. The Pintail, that was originally known as Type 21, XXI actually. So, I do imagine if this had entered service as the Type XXI, would the Germans have named their submarine the Type 21, or would they have gone, hang on, remember that, no, we can't name a submarine for that, we'll have to call it the Type 22. We cannot, at no point can we associate it with that. Because, honestly, and the Blackburn gets enough of and please no one go look it up if you don't know it, you don't want to have your eyes hurt. But the Blackburn has a reason for looking like it does. Still produces a weird looking aircraft. But I have no idea why the Fairey Pintail looks like it does. I've looked through the specification, I've looked through the history. The top wing was raised by 9 inches for Japan, and so they decided to buy about 9 of them. 3 were built for the British, for the Air Ministry. Interesting enough, they're one of the few aircraft I know which are listed as Air Ministry the whole way through. It's as if both the RAF and the Fleet Air Arm go, no, you're not attaching that aircraft to us. It doesn't belong to us. You ordered it. You keep it. You wanted it. We don't. We'll take the Parnell, whatever they produced. We don't care. Just keep that. Apparently, it was an interesting aircraft to land. Because at one point there's one of them where you can't see through the top plane when you're landing because that's below the level of the pilot. I don't know if that's the picture of that one or if that was the other, but they kept mucking around with it and it's just no. It's just no. Buccaneer, maybe I have wrongly gentleman who he is. Mind me, he wants a total Foxtrot uniform. Not sure what that has come up. Manny 6040, they should have named one Godmother. That would have been quite cool and quite cruel. Carl Adrian, Gordon of cartoon reference? I'd hope not. Calvin Asford, the Pintail's tail was shaped that odd for tail gunners not showing the tail. I don't think they actually have a tail gunner. They do technically have a crew of 2, so maybe they could have a tail gunner, but I didn't think they actually did. They have 1 fixed forward firing Vickers machine gun and 1 or 2 3 or 3-inch Lewis guns on scarf ring in the rear compact. So, yeah. Well, I suppose then that does stop them shooting the tail out. Steven, Pintail looks like the Austrian fighters in World War I. The one with star bracing and housed a machine gun about wing. Buccaneer, was there a cunning plan to reduce hangar heights? I hope not. I hope not. Carl Fairey Gordon, better name than HMS Terrible. I think you've tried that a couple of times. Yes, I do have to. Actually, no. HMS Terrible is quite a cool name because there is a terribleness coming on you. Your life is going to be terrible when HMS Terrible arrives. She's going to make it terrible. Nick Waters, they're trying to get away with attaching the wing directly to the fuselage for strength, I guess. Look, unsurprisingly, as said, the pintail doesn't work. And the 9 in Japanese service are Dylan there. What is it with YouTube naval historians and Iron Brew? I'm not sure, but both me and Drakar have been friends for now a while, and we both started Iron Brew at a young age. And we're both naval historians. So we're wondering if there is something in Iron Brew which makes you become a naval historian. Thomas Manuel, I know it's an inline engine, which is kind of weird for those days, but seriously, there's other ways to do this. There are all sorts of things which could have been done to fix this. The 475 horsepower Napier Lion is actually a very good engine. It's the aircraft. I just have no idea what they were coming up with and why they were thinking about it. There has got to have been a better way. Seriously, there has got to have been a better way. Anyway, we now get on to a far more gorgeous looking aircraft. Meet the Fairey Flycatcher. Sorry, just my eyes are enjoying it. Right, the Fairey Flycatcher. Crew 1. It's a single-seat fighter. Why in the Royal Navy have a single-seat fighter in this period? Wingspan 29 feet. Powered by a 400 horsepower Armstrong Sigley Jaguar 4. Oh, look! It's a radial engine! Empty weight 2,000 pounds. All up weight 3,000 pounds. Pardon me. Rate of climb able to do 1,090 feet a minute, or 5.5 meters a second. Could get to 10,000 feet in 9 minutes 29 seconds. Had the ability to have 2 fixed forward firing Vickers machine guns and provision for 4 20-pound bombs under the wings. 4 20-pound bombs under the wings. Now, before you start thinking, what good is a 20-pound bomb? I agree. There is absolutely no reason on earth to carry a 20-pound bomb. In fact, I can honestly not think of one militarily. But you see, you cunning people, the Royal Navy and the Fleet Air Arm had a plan which they managed to get the Air Ministry along with. So, these 20-pound bombs could also be turned into other things which can be dropped with 20 pounds, that are sort of weigh 20 pounds. So, it could be a 20-pound bomb that you can use on people who have no protection. You're just intimidating them for Imperial policing. Or a 20-pound firebomb, which is basically a large fire grenade when you're burning junks and pirate dens in the Far East. Or it could be a 20-pound rather large paintball bomb, which is going to make a mark on a battleship as if it's just been dive bombed for an exercise. Some kits. Good evening. Fairey Free 172 kit was produced by Contrail and Aerostoic. Unfortunately, they're vacuum kits. Now rare, but might turn up on eBay. Ooh. I like the Fairey Free. I think, and in the Fairey Flycatcher, both of those. I would love to find a decent kit of the Fairey Flycatcher. And it's a cool little aircraft. It really is cool. And it does so much. The Flycatcher really does get into all sorts of weird things. Flycatchers were robustly built to satisfy the satisfactory safety factor, and fleet airline pilots handled their early aircraft almost with abandon until one at Gosport was found to be flying persistently left-wing low. The Air Ministry returned this early Flycatcher, powered by a Jaguar 2 engine, to Norfolk for the ferry company to investigate the cause. A wing rigging check found everything correct, and inspection found no structural defect. But when I discovered that this Flycatcher flew left-wing low, with power on, and level with power off, I decided the apparent fault was but a symptom of a defect elsewhere. This led me to examine This is, by the way, the account of Norman Macmillan, who was one of the test pilots for Fairey. This led me to examine the tailplane, and there I found excessive movement. I had the tailplane mounted, temporarily braced, tight with piano wire, after which I found the level flight was restored with power on and maintained with power off. It's now obvious that the propeller torsion airflow, by warping the slack tailplane, had caused it to react as an aileron. The original Flycatcher tailplane mounting was then modified to prevent play from developing in future, and the Air Ministry was informed that the defect had been eliminated. They requested dive tests with the modified mounting to be made and witnessed by their technical staff. This was the first British official requirement for a contractor to make dive tests. Terminal velocity was not then a term in current use, but my full power vertical dives accelerated the Flycatcher close to, if it did not reach, its 282 mile per hour terminal velocity, a speed which was outside the dial range of the ASIs of that period. The test they witnessed satisfied the ministry experts. All Flycatcher tail units were similarly modified. There was no recurrent complaints, and diving of flying catchers became a popular sport with FA pilots. Although, again, several tried to demonstrate that they could actually try to make it disintegrate. None managed to achieve, but parts were lost at sea. When FAA pilots demonstrated convergent dive bombing, the noise made by the Flycatchers was a part of the show. The Jaguar engines had a short strub pipes from their exhaust valves and no silencer ring. Their exhaust roar when diving at full speed was augmented by the sounds from the Fairey Reed propeller. This fixed-pitch Duralim propeller was milled in one piece. Its thin, solid blades were twisted near the root to produce design pitch. It relied on centrifugal loading to aid blade stability, but in a full power dive, propeller tip speed was close to and could even reach supersonic speed. And a drag rise at these speeds caused tip flutter. The combination of sounds from a propeller shockwave and the tip flutter magnified the racket from the engine. Stresses arising from rapidly changing blade angles of air attack during the pull-out from the dive introduced yet another form of propeller flutter that struck a different and final note in the diving cacophony of the Flycatcher. So, again, the Royal Navy has a habit of turning fighters into dive bombers. Derp Squad. The crew of the ship who has to clean up the paint splat on the deck are not on the superstructure are not going to like the pilot. No. Dylan there. I'm quite surprised the engine has no cowling. Was that a feature of the time or a feature of the engine itself? Radial engines often didn't have a cowling. Nick Aswell. Anyone else think the Invincibles and Eagles there are almost identical? They do have some similarity in their lines. Ian Carr, Fairey Fox light bomber of RAF 1966 was recorded as having spectacular performance, so Fairey could make fast aircraft. Yes, they could. Well, and also Eagle is one of the first cruiser carriers. As if you go to the carrier video I did ages ago, that explains what that term is. I'm going to now go to this, because I just think you'll enjoy it. And I'm going to read out that side so you can see it, because it might not come properly. But it's just some really cool pictures. And let's see. The Flycatcher landing on HMS Glorious is the bottom left, the screen. The upper middle one is the Flycatcher on its way down the lift of HMS Glorious. And the bottom middle is the Flycatcher coming out of the lower flying off position on HMS Glorious. The Flycatcher was... Okay, let's see. Go to the next one. In the early years of the Flycatcher's service, the aircraft carriers were using the system of fore and aft arrestor wires, on which two spring-hinged steel jaws, known as Briar hooks, after the Flight Lieutenant G.M. Briar C., who proposed them, on the undercarriage axle of the landing aircraft engaged. After the longitudinal wire system and associated halting devices were abandoned in 1926, and before the original transverse wire system had been modified, reintroduced and standardized in 1933, aircraft landed on without the aid of arresting devices other than the wheel brakes, which were used mainly for directional control during deceleration. However, especially as the Fairey Flycatchers kept getting faster, they decided to dispense the longitudinal wires because they were causing accidents, and especially with the Fairey 3Ds and HMS Hermes. But they also start thinking about how they're going to stop them properly. Now, the Flycatcher 2 was the one pictured, was re-engined. Okay, so no, wrong way. And before we mention, should mention, yes, that was literally the lift shape on Glorious and Courageous. So the idea was that it would allow you to bring aircraft up from the hangar in full flying, ready to take off configuration. Not sure it would pass modern safety briefing. And pretty much, it's a list for the Flycatcher. It's a list of who's who where they serve. They are serving with 401 flight on the Liqueurs, China Station, Argus, Courageous. Then they turn, of course, into 801 Squadron with serve on HMS Furious. Flycatchers are pretty much a constant aircraft in service. Although primarily a fleet fighter, the Flycatcher was better known to the general public as a dive bomber since it was in this capacity that it made the strongest oral and visual impressions. It demonstrated the FAA's dive bombing tactics at, in particular, the RAF displays at Hendon in 1928 and 1929. The Flycatcher was very much a star turn when free from number 405 flight, dived steeply from 2,000 feet, converging from different directions to attack some suitable invented enemy target. It was already recorded the first aircraft of its type to be required by the industry to be dived at full power on constructor's test pilot. Why am I keep emphasizing the Flycatcher as a dive bomber? Okay. 2 reasons. 1, traditional history says that the Royal Navy isn't interested in dive bombers. That's why it doesn't have them, and then you have the Skua come along. What actually happens is in the 1920s, the British are leading the world in many ways in dive bombers. They have some of the best designers and the best aircraft. They have things like the Hart bomber coming, a Hawker Hart bomber, which will be absolutely excellent at it, and various others. But what happens is, as time goes on into war period, you have a certain faction of the Air Ministry gets more and more obsessed with, focused on heavy bombers as the way to win a war, as the way to save lives and stop another World War I happening. And this means they start to see certain things as a threat. And it's partially this experience of studying this history, which is one of the reasons why I'm always so skeptical when people come up going, this is the new way that will win all future wars. And I go, calm down. I'm sure it'll be part of it. I'm sure it'll be an important part of it. But will it replace all the other things as you're talking about? How can it? Explain to me. Make the case to me. Don't just give me declarations that this will be the case. Show me. Because that's why you have a scenario then in World War II that, if you think about it, where are the British dive bombers? I will talk later about a very prominent aircraft which does dive bombing and is good at dive bombing, but it's not really one you associate with it, but it can do it because it's stressed to do so, because it's built rugged. And of course, we talked about the Skua, which is the only aircraft which is developed as a dive bomber, although it's developed as a fighter dive bomber, so that they can get it through. Nick Walters, when supersonic was mentioned, for a moment I wondered, I imagined boom problems like the F-84H. There were some issues. Don't find out. Somehow I like the Flycatcher. After Blackburn, it's an eye treat. Janewth, Armory Models make a 1/48 scale model of the Fairey Flycatcher. Cool. Seems quite good from what I can see in the YouTube review. Cool. I'll have to look it up. I might build that. That might end up in my office. The Royal Navy's not interested in dive bombers. We are having interest in planes that can fit a bomb and dive. Yeah, it's one of those scenarios. Seawind Furious had a T-shaped elevator as well, if I remember. USS Ranger had outriggers for tail wheels, so space on the deck was only for the front half plane. Never repeated. The Royal Navy had outriggers on all their armoured carriers and quite a few other ships in World War II. There is a great picture which was in one of the Taranto videos, I think it was in the last one, where you had the ship on fire, and it might have been in the first one. I'm not sure. Where you have the ship on fire, and there's this aircraft sitting perfectly fine on the outrigger, just far enough away from the fire, it's okay. And you're sort of going, "Yep, that's the Royal Navy, as disturbing as ever." Death Squad, show you. Explain to you. No, sir. Why don't you just buy our shiny new system that will surely win all future wars ever, no matter what anyone else develops? Of course it works. Yeah. Actually, before anyone gets into the whole Lancaster or Halifax debate to Coastal Command from day one, I often wonder what would have happened if the Royal Navy had been able to start building Black Swan class or similar anti-submarine warfare sloops to the same number as they were building destroyers from 1935, as certain admirals, including Henderson, were arguing for. But they were told they had to pick between destroyers and sloops. They couldn't have both, because they couldn't have the extra money. Imagine that if you'd had 2 flotillas of sloops being built ordered every year from 1935. You'd have had maybe as many as 72 ready-made convoy escorts in service, ready to go when war broke out. That would have been quite useful. A, for destroyer numbers, and B, for getting convoys across. Also, it would have helped to kind of work up those yards to be building even more ships. So, now let's look at the Fairey Fleet Wing. And here's one of the things. Can I just ask him, do we all think that nose might be compensating for something? Because that nose does remind me of a modern Porsche. I'm sorry. This nose appears to be compensating for something. I realise that the Rolls-Royce Kestrel is quite a powerful aircraft, engine, but still, that is a very, very long nose. An incredibly long nose. You look from where the pilot is situated, behind the wings, well, behind the upper, the upper wing, and to where the engine is. That is a long, long way. I was asking. Now imagine the pilot sitting above the engine like the Black Van. Yeah. As to say, the Fleet Wing was fun to land. Can't think why it didn't get through its trials. Now, this is one of those interesting aircraft, and when I say interesting, I mean very, very random. By 1926, the Fleet Air Arm, by which name the carrier-borne branch of the RAF was then known at that point. I love the way the author writes it as that way. Rather than the aviation section of the fleet of the Royal Navy, the carrier-borne branch of the Royal Air Force, had seen the need for a two-seater spotter reconnaissance aircraft, which would be able to operate to a limited extent as an interceptor fighter. This sounds like something else which we're talking about later. This sounds kind of like a Fulmar. Powered initially by Rolls-Royce F11 Kestrel 1, and later with a moderately supercharged Kestrel 2 MS. The one and only Fleetwing, N235, was completed in 1929 and was flown for the first time by Norman Macmillan on the 16th of May from Norfolk. Norman Macmillan is one of the key test pilots of the Fairey, and is probably the best test pilot they have in the interwar years. In such a form, the Fleetwing was fitted with wooden wings and completed preliminary trials at Marsden, as well as deck trials with HMS Furious. Only pictures of which I can find in here. Blackburn, Short, Brothers and Hawker were also competing to meet our requirement, which was finally met by Hawker with a much modified version of the Hart. And this aircraft went into production as the Osprey under specification 01930. Of the four contenders, the Fleetwinger was evidently the runner-up. The two aircraft in the float-plane versions were evaluated more or less side-by-side at May. Felixstowe that's the Ministry of Aircraft's experimental engineering testing place at Felixstowe in June 1930. The Osprey was considered superior by May test pilots because of its better maneuverability in the air, its easier maintenance, and its resistance to corrosion and entry of seawater. Also, and this was not really mentioned in here but is mentioned elsewhere, they could actually see when landing in the Osprey. Just a small thing, you know. I'm landing. I can see the ground. Woohoo! The landing in the Fleetwing. No, lower plane, almost in the way. Oh, I'm gonna get over it. I can see. Yeah, I'm gonna land. Yeah, we're live. Praise be. Oh. Dylan Lair. It almost has a hot rod look to it with long nose. Lovely shape, though. I agree about lovely shape, but it is a very long aircraft. Descon, the name fits. The lines of the airframe look more like a boat than an aircraft. Yeah. Ian Carr, Fairey seemed to have upset the Air Ministry by importing state-of-the-art US Curtiss D12 engines rather than specifying British but engines on the Fairey Fox, which looks like the Fleetwing. Yeah, that caused fun. Hello, Nicole Ross, and happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Hope you're all having fun, by those of my American listeners, and please do, as always, if you do enjoy these videos, please do subscribe and press the little bell down there. It's always fun to have more people and returning people to chat to. Schumack, and regardless, the Luftwaffe developed its own type of mafia. Yep. Carl Gaswood, not everyone can appreciate the P-39's engine layout. Yogi Khan, Vought Corsair 4FU had the same problem with long engine mount and the pilot seat for back. Yes, but actually, you know what? The Corsair actually had better more visibility than this did. They tried crab landing in this, which is when you come in the side and then you do a sharp turn, and it wasn't that great. Nick Wallace, I'm looking at the distance between the front seat and engine. Unless Kestrel was very long, what was in that space? Fuel tank? Well, that's the interesting thing. They say they have the fuel tank in... Well, they do have the Somna fuel there, but it's not that long ranged. Again, if that was all fuel tank, I would expect a far longer range than this thing's capable of. It doesn't list its range here, but yeah. Basically, it ends up serving its life as a hack aircraft for the Schneider Trophy team in 1931. So basically, for seaplane practice and weather sea state tests, rather than them using the aircraft which they actually want to fly for the trophy. Greg Starsky, and this is why the RN had no trouble landing the Corsair. They had lots of practice. To be fair, compared to some of their aircraft, that's not even a long nose. Wait until we get to some of the Hawker ones. Although not the Osprey. Third Squad. The pilot from the Falcon could see the ground to either side and slightly behind the aircraft. Yeah. Absolutely. I imagine someone telling them at some point, right, Fairey, nice try. Now go back to making planes with radial engines. Well, this is the point. They don't make aircraft for radial engines. The first one we've actually talked about, which has a radial engine, is the Fairey Flycatcher. The rest don't. They don't. They're not making them. And they're not making them for a reason. They are not as fast as they want them to be. And they want the Fairey lust after high speed. They want rugged, reliable airframes, and they want these high-speed engines. And it's only when they start to look back at various things and go, well, hang on. You know, why aren't the Royal Navy not really buying a new superstar aircraft off us? Well, why are Blackburn getting the orders? What's going wrong? That they start to sort of consider a radial engine. Seamine, could this fit on the elevators or only for land bases? Oh, it could be made to fit on the elevators. It did on Furious anyway. I got an interesting pair of videos. If you like long lectures about the B-29, LeMay, and the rise and the fall of the Supreme Air Command, it's on the Dole Institute for Politics YouTube channel. Might have a look it up. Kahaman, what do you make of Russian claims of chasing off a US warship? Well, they probably overflew a US warship, and now if it changed direction at all that day, they chased it off. It decided that there were rocks up ahead, so it changes its direction, or that it doesn't want to come into contact with land. We chased it away! Yeah. That's good. I've just remembered Neil Armstrong's X-15 landing description. When the head of NASA asked how much clearance from the trees he had, oh, at least 100 feet, either side. I think the wings did fold on the test aircraft. More general point about design procurement back then. Did the ministry get visibility on what companies were thinking, plans, models to say nope before they reach the point of prototypes? Yes. So you get the paper plans would come in, and then the ministry would go, we like the look of this, this, and this, these designs, build them, and they would pay for the prototypes because they would take them off to the Ministry of Defense, the Air Ministry's testing areas, and test them to pretty much destruction to check them out. But so the aircraft would be quite well tested before they got. They'd be tested by the test pilots for the company, who'd be testing them before they took them off and refining, making sure they worked. And then they'd be tested by the Air Ministry, and if they liked them, they'd all make suggestions going back, and then that would go into production. So, the next generation. Dun dun dun. That's good. Though sometimes the company would produce the prototype on the hope that the Air Ministry would be interested rather than to a specification. Sometimes it works, sometimes it costs a lot. Traditionally, the companies which had the most success with that approach are Supermarine and Hawker. Also, who were they? De Havilland had some success with that, and they do quite well if you consider their aircraft in service as well in World War II. Because during World War II, they have all sorts of different things in service. Ian Carr, Hawker produced Hurricane prototype at risk. Yep. Constance, were the tested planes like free samples for the industry, or did they have to buy them? Usually you ended up having to give them to the Air Ministry for free, so it was kind of nice. You think about it today, can you imagine, I don't know, Boeing or Lockheed developing a fighter from scratch, entirely putting all their money building it, or a fighter aircraft, or even a bomber aircraft from scratch, and then handing it over, their sole prototype, flying prototype, over to a government and going, see? Give it a fly! See how good it is! You want to buy them! Nowadays, it's a case of, you write the specifications, we'll design what you're going to get. There is a good market. When there's healthy competition, it's a good market. Dove Squad. If I remember right, with Supermarine and Hawker, it was usually that they had modified an existing airframe for military use rather than designing from scratch. The Spitfire was developed from a seaplane racer. Not really. The Spitfire is developed from a fighter which is being designed for the Royal Navy, for the Fleet Air Arm, which itself was developed using the same techniques as were being used to develop the seaplane race aircraft, the Schneider Trophy aircraft. It's often a simplified process, so it's actually quite a complicated process of how it gets there. Grassazi, Textron did that just with Scorpion. US Air Force didn't buy, though. Sad, it's a nice plane. I do agree, the Scorpion is a nice aircraft the Textron built. Grassazi, I think Northrop did the F5 on its own account as well. It used to be common. It used to be the standard practice. It used to be the way things were done in the good old days. Now meet the Fairey Gordon. Now, I have this in here because it's the Free F Mark V. But technically, it serves always with the Royal Air Force. Yes, that is an Armstrong Siddeley Panther engine. You can all be confused about it now, as I am. No, I don't know what happened to it. Something went wrong. A wingspan of 45 feet 9 inches. Length 36 feet 9 inches. Height 14 foot 2 inches. And a wing area of 438 square feet. Empty weight 3,500 pounds. All up weight 5,906 pounds. 525 horsepower. Armstrong Siddeley Panther. WWII. Whee, by gum. How both were given both the Seal and the Gordon were given individual type names and were, with their different power plants and other changes, sufficiently unlike developed Free F to have separate treatment among the Fairey types. This is why they're separate chapters rather than combined with the Free F in this book. Because of the diameter of the engine and the exhaust ring, the single forward-firing Vickers gun can no longer lie snugly in a blast trough on the port side, as with the Free F, but had to be mounted externally. Otherwise, the armament of the Gordon was similar to that of the Free F, with an aft-firing Lewis gun on a Fairey high-speed mounting, and a bomb load carried in racks under the wings, consisting of two 230-pound or 250-pound bombs, 4 112-pound plus 4 20-pound Sighter bombs. Yes. Let me explain the Sighter bombs, okay? So there was an idea that you could use a 20-pound bomb to A, test your dive sight, because a 20-pound bomb is going to fall similar to a 250-pound bomb. And otherwise, as I said, it can be used for various other dive bombing things, but mainly, and I say this with all full due respect and attention, it's wackadoodle. It is. It's wackadoodle. Some of the things they're talking about with these sort of aircraft. Because of the low installed weight of the Panther, the Gordon had a rather short takeoff run at full load and improved all-round performance. This was pretty much the first point. They realised that this made the aircraft far faster and better with its takeoff and load. But these all served with the Royal Air Force, although 21 Gordons were sold to the Brazilian government. I'm not sure why, but the Brazilians did love their Gordons. They used them for quite a long time. In fact, they were still in service till the end of World War II. Melanie 1640. Something Supermarine was somewhat busy building elliptical rugs. Calvin Gassman, Fairey free, radar engine and that long nose. Someone definitely was compensating. Yeah, P.J. doesn't. Supermarine Type 224 Spitfire, the gullwing version, was designed to the same specification as Gloucester Gladiator. Yeah. Officially. Unofficially, the Supermarine Walrus, when that entered service, the Supermarine were already talking with the Fleet Air Arm about the Fleet Air Arm needing a really good fighter for the Mediterranean and for a cap interceptor operations. And that's what they'd started working on. See what? Have pies. We'll travel across town. Later, gents. Take care. Hello, Joseph Cleek. Greg Sahowski. Also, both of you have got messages retracted. Nick Waters. That fuselage oddly seems fat behind that choice of engine. Maybe just me. I have no idea really to describe it. It just looks wrong. I don't know why. It just does. I'm sure they didn't mean it to look wrong, but it just does. It looks wrong. That engine on the map, it looks wrong. It flies well, and I know it's a very powerful engine. It just looks wrong. Dirt Squad, who needs a £500 bomb when you can decorate the enemy with 80 pounds of red, white, and blue paint? Well, you know. Kaham, what did Brazil use the Gordon for? It was their reconnaissance aircraft and bombing aircraft and support aircraft for their forces. Land-based, primarily. But they did have a few float plane versions. Nick Waters, this sounds like a concept by someone who never seen a Bofors gun. Bofors was, as Nick Derp Squad said, made in 1934, so you know. Hey ho. But there were other guns. Do you know what what WTF is that an abomination? That is the Fairey 3F Mark V, aka the Fairey Gordon. Now, I have to admit, it took me a while before I realized the Gordon existed. Basically, reading through this book and then checking Wikipedia and checking no one was doing a joke on me by actually double checking the specifications file and 3 other books to check it actually existed. Because up until this point, until the point I found out about it when I was doing my PhD, I was happily in the bliss of believing that the only thing named Gordon, which ever went around the world, was an engine on Thomas the Tank Engines. A rather grumpy express engine. Greg Sassy, it looks like the Thunderbird's tunneling vehicle with the giant drill thing on front. That's what it looks like! Do you know what I mean? Put a cowling on the radio to decently be showing that much skin. Gahammond, they're swordfish. Well, they couldn't carry torpedoes. Nicole Ross. Were float plane versions different, or did they just attach floats? They just attached floats where the wheels were. Joseph Click. The US Navy would contract with one company to design a plane and contract with another to build it. Did the RN do the same? Not pre-World War II. During World War II, they had trouble with Fairey keeping up with demand of Swordfish, so they handed the contract to Blackburn, who then churned them out. Quite happily and very successfully. Fairey, despite having built so many 3Fs, etc., and Fairey 3s, were not that good at mass production. They were okay when they were dealing with orders of up to roughly 300. Once you're dealing with orders of a couple of thousand, they're going, ah! Ian Carr, looks like the Gordon was the simplest way to install a radial to the 3F. Yes, I don't think anyone applied much thought to that. Much thought at all. But, believe it or not, yeah. Okay, so this is the Gordon. This is the land-based variation, the RAF one. Meet the Seal, the Fleet Air Arm variant. All up weight of £6,000. or roughly 2 3/4 tons. Wingspan 40 feet, 5 feet 9 inches. Length 33 feet 8 inches. Height 12 foot 9 inches. Wing area 443 feet and 443.5 feet square feet. Maximum speed 138 miles per hour. Endurance 4 hours 30 minutes. Service ceiling 17,000 feet. Time to altitude of 5,000 feet. 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Now, I have to admit, some of these I've actually done the maths on, so you can be very, very worried about the maths and see if it's going to work. So, there it is expanded. And I'll be back in a second. I've drunk iron brew. Too much. Hey, Micum. Did you have to expand it out? Well, yes, I thought you should see it. And that can carry a 500-pound bomb. I'm sorry, I also did a quick dash down to see the trainee assistant, Fluffy Research Assistant, and check he was okay. Let's see. Ah, there you go. Not sure if you can see it. I will post it to the community quickly. Just quickly. Right then. It does look better. About pretty much. How do I describe the seal? Well, in addition, 13 seals were sold abroad. 6 to the Peruvian government, and 1 to the Argentine government. 4 went to Latvia, and 2 went to Chile. It was not necessarily the most popular aircraft, and you can also have a look at the markings on the Latvian aircraft. They're quite interesting. If you can't see them, I'll do a zoom in the recorded videos, and they get around. Honestly, the Fleet Air Arm is not as enamored with this aircraft as it is with previous versions of the Fairey Free, and to an extent, they're sitting looking at it and going, "It's causing us issues. It has to have its tailplane rebuilt to make it work from the Gordon design," and that's one of the reasons there are so many differences between it and the Gordon. Is literally because of the differences that have been built in it to make it work and practical for the Fleet Air Arm. You'll also be glad to know this is the aircraft which introduces that lovely idea of maybe having a collapsible, porous, it turns out, reserve fuel tank that you can insert into it for long-range flying into a cockpit. Ugh. Carmen, did the Swordfish have export success? Well, lots of other nations bought it, but that was mainly because they were, by that point, allied nations and didn't have any choice. So they were operating out of the UK. Ian Carr, Fairey moved on to building the Albacore, Barracuda, and Firefly, leaving Blackburn to continue building Swordfish. Again, in succession, let's put it this way, quite a lot of Fairey's production gets shifted over to other companies. They're very good at building the first 300. Nick Waters, the float thing, not Fairey, but I know UK later bought 2 batches of PBY with and without wheels, but built into floats. Did the wheels cause less effective floats or just more expensive? Just more expensive, and depends where you're operating if you needed them. Descott, subcontracting wasn't unusual for large aircraft orders. In the US, a lot of aircraft companies made their start building other designers' projects. And actually, that's how Fairey got their start building Short Brothers projects. But, yeah, it's not as normal in Britain pre-World War II. In fact, it's completely unnormal in Britain pre-World War II, really. But it's very normal once you get into World War II, in that certain companies prove far better at doing mass production than others do. Ian Carr, Seal equals Gordon with a hook. And a redesigned tail. Genius, time to leave. Work beckons. Good luck. Jermac, to walk around YouTube logarithm, Latvian Roundel was very close in shape to pre-1945 Finnish Roundel. Yes, incredibly, but... Did the USN buy the Swordfish? No. And how long did they last in service? Not as long. They were 91 built, and they're not as long as the short as the Fleet Air Arm wanted me. So we've come to that special time again in the production lines. We're getting close to that creature that is the Fairey Swordfish, and so we have specification M130 come up now. Any of you will probably recognize this from the Blackburn Saga and the Blackburn aircraft development. But well, we'll get into that. Surf Tectonics, hello! Why was the Swordfish so successful sinking warship? There were a lot of them, and they kept having a go at it. And they were there the whole way through World War II. So they kind of have an advantage in that whenever there's a lull in capabilities of the enemy, they're there to do it. And they do it well. So the idea was that there would be a specification for a torpedo bomber ship plane. And this one is then continued in S1533. This production, of course, is asking for the speed at 4,000 feet with the engines running at maximum permissible RPM is not to be less than 130 knots, which really isn't that fast. The landing speed is not to exceed 55 knots, which is really, really not that fast. Might explain why aircraft couldn't slow down enough for them. But here's the big thing. The specification is issued to govern the production of a two-seat torpedo bomber ship plane designed for fleet use to carry a 1,866-pound Type K torpedo or a 2,000-pound bomb load with a maximum all-up weight of 9,300 pounds. That is pretty much, how do I put this politely? That's asking for a lot, and it's a fairly exciting, a fairly forward-looking specification. Airspeeds and all those things aside, the requirements it's looking for its aircraft is looking for a very rugged aircraft which can carry a lot of weaponry. There are so many aircraft we've already been talking about this week which could fit that category. Good luck, Juno199. Happy birthday again. Swordfish could pretty much get in the air from anything. In fact, I'm fairly sure a swordfish could get in the air if you took its engine out. Could probably get in the air as a glider. But with Nicole Ross, but with a weak engine, not really. You have to remember again, and I'm always pointing this out to Swordfish. The Swordfish is brand new, state of the art in 1933. That doesn't make it old or out of date by 1939. And the fact it serves through the whole way of World War II is mainly because it's very, very useful. And it's very, very reliable. It's not a weak engine. When it's built, it's a very powerful engine. But also, one of the things which is interesting is the engines. Okay. So the engines. Any suitable rated type of British engine which has passed the 100-hour service type test may be used. Suggested types are the 825 horsepower Armstrong Siddeley Leopard or the Rolls-Royce H10 with metal air screw. Neither of which feature on any of the types that go in, because the Bristol Pegasus is pretty much better. F and Hun, materials requirement is an interesting one. Yes, but again, it reflects the technology at the time. All parts of the aircraft which contribute to its strength in flight are to be made of metal. Each metal part in the structure of the aircraft is to be protected against corrosion by whichever the method stated in ADM numbers 160, 190, and 193 is applicable. Basically, it means they want a all-metal airframe and wing struts. But quite a lot of the aircraft is still fabric covered, and it's not an all-metal fuselage or anything like that. So again, it's a hybrid of what goes through. Never heard of the Rolls-Royce H10. Well, the Rolls-Royce H10 is better known as, if I just check my notes, I've got it here, because I thought someone might ask that question. Trouble is, now I have to find my notes. If I remember correctly, the H10 is... not that one. Not those notes. I think it's the lion. No, it's the buzzard. Sorry, I got that wrong. It was the buzzard. Discord, didn't Swordfish have the problem of occasionally getting airborne in a stiff breeze and needing to be tied down? If you had a stiff enough breeze across the deck, you did have issues sometimes. Mark Dobson, Lion was Napier. I know. I'm sorry. I got my brain managed to flick up because it was trying to go from memory. Lion was Napier, and Napier was Lion. No, Lion was Napier. Thank you, though. Dicasso, 1. The important thing is a reliable engine. The Swordfish spec M140 achieved all that was expected of it. Criticizing it for not being able to engage fighters totally misses the point. Well, that's, of course, the strange thing. If you're an ME-109, some Swordfish did actually manage to shoot you down. We can all feel very sad for the ME-109 pilot, because what they do is they do a very high speed, and Drac and I had lots of fun talking about this during the Toronto videos for bilge pumps. They'd come in, they'd swoop in, and they go, we're blazing in, we're blazing in, we're blazing in. And the trouble is they didn't realize quite how slow the aircrafts were going, so they'd maybe pull up. And as they pulled up, this one would do this and go into its underbelly. Are you able to stream in higher resolution than 480? When I try, it starts to have problems, and we're having conversations with BT about it. That's currently our internet provider. Shoot me. Embarrassing for the ME-09. Nicole Ross, was this spec issued by the RF or the RN? Well, it was the RN. In the 1930s, prior to the Fleet Air Arm transferring back to the Royal Navy, what would happen is the Rear Admiral aircraft carriers would get together with the Fleet Air Arm officers, which were some RAF, some RN, and would discuss what they need for the future aircraft. That would go to the Admiralty. The Admiralty would then put their spin on it. They would send it to the Air Ministry. The Air Ministry would then put their spin on it, and they would send it out to the industry, and then industry would then respond with their options, which would go to the Air Ministry and then back to the Admiralty. The Admiralty would say what they liked. The Air Ministry would then look at what the Admiralty said they liked and say whether they liked them or not. And then they'd go back to industry and tell them to develop the ones they often want them to develop. Then it would go back. Then it would be developed, and it would first be tested by the Air Ministry, and then it would be sent to the Fleet Air Arm, who would then report to the Admiralty whether they got what they wanted. Nice and complicated. Sure, Mac. No, they were shot down by Spitfires. Yes, well, that was what they claimed, but there were no Spitfires in Norway, and at several points there were no Hurricanes either anywhere near them. They were shot down by Blackburn Skewers and Swordfish. Those were the only aircraft which were flying anywhere near them that could have shot them down. This was, of course, the Blackburn answer to it. The B3. Chelsea, you'd think the 109 pilots would have learned that from 1939 flying as the poles. No. Good luck, Constantinopolis. Carl Gasford, peppering down the belly of a BF 109 is deflection shooting. I happened that way. The pilot was a I happened that way. The pilot was a gun genius. If it happened that way, the pilot was a gun genius. No Gloucester Gladiators. No, because Gloucester is a different company to Fairey. We'll get no. Gloucester Gladiators in Norway, they did get there, sort of, but not really. When they're available, it's lovely, but they're not. Norway is an interesting scenario for having aircraft present. Let's just leave it at that. The aircraft, the cockpit in the B3 looks even further back than the Fairey Gordon. Yep, and it has another Rolls-Royce Buzzard engine. It has in it the 825 horsepower Rolls-Royce Buzzard. Always fun to have. What is interesting is that 9640. Did I suggest and I mentioned was not streaming at 720 or 620, or did you try 720 without the 60 FFP and have problems? Basically, I've tried streaming at 960 by 540 and 1280 by 720. And 960 by 540 sometimes works. And 1280 by 720 never works. And basically, if we've been having a bad internet day, I automatically go for 854 by 480 or 480p because, frankly, it just gets problematic otherwise. Obwonkt. I believe 109 was down by a swordfish pulling up and causing the 109 to go into a high-speed stall. Yeah. There was the other option one did, which was... And, of course, you don't have... The report doesn't come through the other side, so you only have the report from Swordfish crew, and there actually wasn't anyone else watching it. So you only have their report, but the claim was that they were the ME-109 tried to swoop in directly behind them and swoop down and come in like that, and so they did that, and of course they went vertical, and it couldn't, so it passed on them with the tail gunner of the Swordfish firing vertically down and peppering the ME-109 from above. Which is not a scenario you want to be in. I'm surprised when they claimed the ME-109 crashed soon afterwards. I'm laughing, but the poor pilot of the ME-109. But it would have been the poor aircrew of the Swordfish if he'd managed to pull it off. So, but again, it's a kind of weird position to think of a Swordfish doing a sort of hello, and you wouldn't get. You can imagine the pilot going, I'm going to kill him. What the hell? Excuse the French. Shades of Harry Biffing. Look down, shoot down. Thank you, Nicole, Rossini, and Carr. Picasso. I agree it could defend itself. The real problem is the populist understanding of the history. The Swordfish did its work very well. It probably exceeded what was expected of it. Good cruise, good plane. Yep. They did do very well. So... this was the other requirement. What does the lovely Fairey company produce? Well, they produce an aircraft, which I'll be getting to in a second, because it is very much the TSR-1. It doesn't quite become a Swordfish. With a wingspan of 46 feet, a length of 39 feet 3 inches. Sounds similar to anything else. Height 16 foot 6 inches. Wing area, 442 feet. Powered by a 525 horsepower Rolls-Royce Kestrel 3 MS V12 liquid-cooled supercharged engine. Now, that picture on the side, I've shown you the Blackburn. That I'm describing the Fairey for you. And that is the third option, the Gloucester TSR-38. You can think about that potentially having done Taranto. The Fairey proposal had a maximum speed of 136 miles per hour at 2,000 feet. Rate of climb of 880 feet per minute. And 1.303 Vickers machine gun in port side engine cowling. in their traditional position, and 1 Lewis gun in rear cockpit on Fairey high-speed mounting. All for this. All for the M130 specification. Right then. Monday 6:40. Do you know if you're sending 540 at 720 at 60 frames per second, or just 30 and still problems? 30 and still problems on the 540 and 720. I don't think, because I've not got the it doesn't allow me to do the 60 frames per second because I haven't got the paid version of XSplit at the moment. I might well treat myself to the paid version of XSplit because I might see if that fixes my problems magically. Although I'm sure that's not the reason for issues. Booster Buddha, what's the most embarrassing? Being shot down by a swordfish or a bolt and pull defiant? Defiant. F-Ball Gnome. Hello. Oh, sorry I'm late. Had family obligations. Don't worry. It's Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone who's actually joining us. And if you're not, I can understand why not. There's lots of food coming your way. Descod, getting shot from directly above was probably the most dangerous from a pilot in M109. Thin glass over the top of cockpit, no armor plate or thick glass. Yeah. Nicole Ross, why was the height so high? Did the rudder fall down? No, that was the height of the upper wing. Nah, it would be a blind fury. Well, Swordfish is more cynical, British style. Nigel, can you take a look outside? And if wheel are wet due to waves, I don't want to drop the torpedo from too high. yeah. Basically, there is always the threat that the Swordfish becomes a submarine. Thank God you're unable to run 60 frames per second. My laptop barely handles 360p as it is. Ouch. Sturf Trektronics, ME-109 pilot wanted to see if he could shoot the swordfish with his eyes closed, right when a wind shear hit his plane. Oh. I don't think the poles would have followed the torpedo in. Probably. So here's the Fairey Swordfish. And you guessed it, the Swordfish is a dive bomber! Ha ha ha! How many of you saw that coming? Yes, that was them practicing what was called the ripple dive. That picture on the right of your screen. Stats, 2,391 built, of which only 692 were built by Fairey, 1,699 by Blackbird, so possibly should be called Blackburn Swordfish. We'll leave that to one side, though. Powered by one 690 horsepower Bristol Pegasus. Maximum speed of 143 miles per hour, with torpedo at 7,580 pounds. Yes, that rate of climb is correct. They could climb at, well, 870 feet per minute at with full weight at sea level, and 690 feet per minute at 5,000 feet. So, you know, they had fun. Endurance, 5 hours, 30 minutes, without any extra fuel tanks added on. Service ceiling, 16,500 feet. Guns, 1 fixed forward, 1 Lewis or K machine gun in the rear. Potential 860-pound RP-3 rocket projectiles, Mark II and later, and bombs, one 1,670-pound torpedo, or a 1,500-pound mine, or 1,500 pounds in total of bombs on the fuselage. The Swordfish is a very interesting aircraft. What is interesting about this book is it basically has an entire section on, first, the G431, which is one variant of aircraft they're building. And you start to look at it and go, hang on, I recognise that shape. Then you see the S930, and then that's sort of interesting. And then you see the TSR1, and that's starting to come with a recognisable shape. And then you go over the page. Ooh, that's starting to get a very recognisable shape. And once you get to pretty much here, it's starting to look incredibly recognisable shape. Because these are the Swordfish. And it slowly evolves. And this is the thing. Fairey are allowed 2 specifications and all sorts of other scenarios for them to evolve it. And develop it. And turn it into the aircraft it becomes. And this is one of my favourite pictures in this entire book. A Swordfish flying past HMS Victorious at Plymouth in July 1969 as Victorious was taken to the scrapyard. Tom Fannel, I sent both videos to you on Discord. Are you your AC Naval History, I suspect? Yep, that's me. Decasso, horsepower is not directly related to cubic capacity. Thanks, Rubra and Lovesey, amongst others. Swordfish crew by Poles. Don't want to even think about it. I think some were flown by Poles. I'll have a look at all the different flights listed here. Royal Canadian Navy gets some. Various allied navies provide pilots for them. They replaced Fairey Seals, Blackburn Baffins, Blackburn Sharks. Almost everything. And they serve on pretty much every carrier you can think of. In number 842 Squadron, in February 1943 alone, was operating aboard Fencer, Indefatigable, Furious, Hunter, and Campania at the same time. Because they had the squadron split up, so filling in for other air groups which were short aircraft in 1943. $6040. So was it a Fairey or Blackburn production one that delivered the special torp to Lindemann? I think it was a Blackburn one. Nick Waters, so were the other proposals close to winning the tender? The Blackburn one came very close. The Swordfish was just that much more reliable. It was considered a very rugged airframe, and the Fairey had gone with a very reliable engine, which was great. They then couldn't produce as much as fast as they could, so it was handed over to Blackburn, who were quite good at rapid production. SN Pi, hello, for starters. Philip Vian would have approved of the aerial pirate action. Might have motivated the trials to one-up the air pirates. Tribals. Yeah, it could have been interesting if there had been some pyrotechnical competition. So, Tectonics. I think the Swordfish was so popular because they could get instant lift off the flight deck so they could pack more of them on the carriers. They could certainly do quite a lot of them for an alpha strike. But more than that, the Fairey Swordfish were very capable when it came to being easy to maintain. And that sounds strange when we talked about sort of the Fairey company so far, because some of their aircraft have been very easy to maintain, some of them have been absolutely atrocious to maintain. And basically, I would always say the Swordfish is a cross between the Blackburn predecessor to the Shark and the Fairey 3F. In that Fairey have nicked some of the ideas from Blackburn, or what I should say, done an homage to them in terms of maintenance and how you can get into things, including slightly raise the undercarriage so they can more easily get in underneath the aircraft to load torpedoes, but also get into the bits of the engine which are able to be accessible from underneath. So this makes the Fairey very easy to maintain, and that's often the deciding factor within the Shark. There are various options, and you could have very easily had the Royal Navy go with the Blackburn Shark, and it'd be the Shark we'll be talking today about this great aircraft in World War II with this great lift capability and this brilliant reliability. But honestly, the difference is marginal maintenance access when you're thinking about it from a testing perspective. But I think actually, as much as I would have loved the Royal Navy to go with a Blackburn, because I think in many ways they deserved it more than Fairey, because they'd been more consistent in their deliverance of quality and hadn't produced the Gordon or the Seal or the Pintail. They had issues when it came to the fact that if you have maintenance access, if you make maintenance access as easy as possible, it speeds up that maintenance. So even though it would only take maybe another minute or so in terms of getting access versus versus the Shark, of the Shark versus the Swordfish, another minute, it was still another minute, and those minutes add up long term. And I think that was the deciding factor. Nicole Ross, when were they replaced by Avengers? They weren't replaced by Avengers. They outlived the Avenger in service with the Fleet Air Arm. We'll be talking about Albacores, Barracudas, and Avengers. And the dirty little secret of the Royal Navy is that the Swordfish outlives its successor, the Albacore, its successor, the Barracuda, and the aircraft bought because the successor wasn't available in time, the Avenger. The Swordfish outlives them all in service. Technically, it's replaced in a frontline role, i.e. flying from strike carriers and fleet carriers in 1943 by them. Technically 1943, but it still turns up occasionally because we have a space where short airframes, it can carry a radar and do the anti-submarine patrol. It's very useful. Aviator Enterprise, how many float variants were produced? Are there any notable examples beside HMS Warspite? Any Swordfish aircraft could be the float variant. They could do the float changeover. The floats were designed to fit onto the wheel sockets, so they could do the changeover of any aircraft they wanted at pace anywhere in the world, pretty much. And they did. So pretty much, you could say there were 2,391 float plane variants produced. It's slightly rarer, but specifically as float planes, and specifically operating as float planes, you have which squadron? Numbers 701, 702, and 705 catapult flights are the official ones. So technically, you would expect them to have 24 to 36 aircraft assigned to the float plane role. Joe, not a full squadron. There may be odd single pilots in British squadron, but there may be single. Only naval operations, anti-submarine patrols in coastal commands in Wellington and Mosquitoes. Not sure where that came from, Joe. I'm sure you had another question above about it. Nicole Ross, did they ever fly off a merchantman? Yes, Swordfish were flown off everything. They flew off Max, they flew off the merchant aircraft carriers, they flew off you name it, they were flying off it. The number 836 squadron was actually the operational pool for Max ships. And number 840 squadron in 1942 were specifically doing the escort carriers, Battler and Attacker, and Empire McAlpine, which was a Mac ship. Ian Carr, Rutog, Swordfish. Rocket-assisted launch. Yep, it allows you to take even more weight. Gahaman, so do you think the F-35 will be very reliable and easy to maintain? Well, relatively. They have big access panels. I'm worried about the skin, but we're gonna be talking to Steve George tomorrow. That's actually what Bilge Pumps is recording tomorrow morning with Steve George. So we will ask him those questions and see what he says. TAC cover T4, TAC covert 4. When you're the RAF and have huge land bases, you can sacrifice ease of maintenance for performance. When you realize that HMS Unicorn can't be every once, well, make it all maintainable on a ship. Yep. Although the RN carriers do have a lot of maintenance facilities, which is far more than other carriers, which is another reason which affects the air group size. People always going, oh, it's the weight of the armored hangar. It's the weight of the armor on the ship. And you go, no, it's the hangar size. And when you look at the size of the ship, you realize the hangar is as limited size as it is because they have all these workshops included, which are for things like maintaining the engines and being able to rebuild the aircraft. It has an impact. And people go, oh, but they can't launch they can't carry as many aircraft. Yes, but on D+6, their air group will still be fully serviceable while your aircraft will be at 25%. Ta-da! The Royal Navy's plan for how to win a war. Day +1, yes, you can launch a full strike, but maybe you hit us, maybe you don't. Either way, you won't have that strike ever again. It will never be as big. Abadaski, why did no one have the idea of placing a float plane Swordfish on all destroyers and use it as the submarine warfare convoy escort? They did try all sorts of things with it. Shoot me, does it outlive the Lightning II? Let's see. Currently, and I have an up-to-date list which I have access to because I actually kept this up because I didn't have it in my notes, so I quickly looked at it. Looked it up on, and I have to admit this is from Wikipedia because it's a list of all the viable swordfish in the world, and it's the most up-to-date list. So, right then. Surviving aircraft. In Canada, there is a Swordfish 2 on static display at the Canadian Aviation Space Museum. There is a Swordfish 4 on display at Shearwater Aviation Museum in Nova Scotia. It's been restored to airworthy condition and was last flown in 1994. That's HS 469. And there's a Swordfish 4 in storage at Reynolds Alberta Museum in Wetaskiwin, Alberta, HS 498, and no one's quite sure whether it's flyable or not. In Malta, there is HS 491, Swordfish 4, currently still under restoration at the Malta Aviation Museum in Takilia Atard. In the UK, we have a Swordfish 4 in storage at the Royal Air Force Museum in Stafford. And we have a Swordfish 3 under restoration to airworthy with private owners in White Walton, Berkshire. It last flew in 2006 and was previously owned by Vintage Wings Canada. It's been sold to its new current owners in 2019. HS 618, Swordfish 2 on static display at the Fleet Aero Museum in the Oval, Somerset. I don't think they're going to make that one flyable again. LS 326, Swordfish 2, airworthy with Navy Wings in Ilchester, Somerset. NF 370, Swordfish 3 on static display at the Imperial Museum in Duxford, Cambridgeshire. Whilst it was built in 1944 and was operated by the RAF, patrolling the North Sea as part of Coastal Command, it's been with the Imperial Museum Duxford since 1986, and in 1998, a restoration project actually turned its airframe back to airworthy condition. Although it still has a non-functional Pegasus engine, they do actually have a functional Pegasus engine on site, so they could theoretically make it fly. And it's very, very good looking. And there is a Swordfish 1, airworthy with Navy Wings in Ilchester and Somerset. And there's also, in America, there is a Swordfish 4 on display at the American Air Power Heritage Museum of the Commemorative Air Force in Dallas, Texas. So, Texas, once again, proving that they do things right by actually holding on to the heritage even of others. But I'm just glad there's another swordfish in the sky. A swordfish right there. Dev Squad, the Fairey Swordfish. Proof of the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Bingo. Gahaman, are there any flying swordfish left? As I said, two of them. And there are all sorts of plans afoot for those. Alvaski, the Dutch managed to stick a float plane on their Van Ghent destroyers, and those were derived from British AI series, so it's doable. It would have been doable, but... Death Squad. I should add old Hurricanes that were considered not fit for service defending Britain anymore. Essentially, they were going to be scrapped or canonised, so no real loss. Those ones were ones fitted to the Mac catapult ships. Jermac, about Pole's flying swordfish. Jermac. That was a long way back, that quote. Look at that quote from Jermac. Yeah, agreed. That's good. I would add old... no, thought back on them. 986 Rato. Yes. Rocket-assisted takeoff. So much fun. Sure, Mac. Did the US ever operate Swordfish? No, but Texas has managed to acquire one. So maybe Texas operated them. I wouldn't put it past it. Let's be honest. What aircraft would be more suitable for a Texas Ranger than a Swordfish? We want a rugged aircraft which is one riot, one Swordfish. Sorry, I should not talk too much. I do have a distant cousin who is, I think, a Texas Ranger. I think that's what he is now. And so I do get round the family. You hear the stuff comes, and you sort of go, ah. And then you look at, and then if you're anything like me, you go and do some research and go, oh, that's where that comes from. Gamhan, is the Cunas air group small to allow US planes to be rapidly surged to it in combat? It's not going to be a small air group. It's going to be a viable air group. At the moment, it's small because we haven't ordered all the F-35s yet. We are working up the air group still because... And here's the interesting thing going on. For a long time, the idea was that Britain was going to get 138 F-35s, which we might on long term in total. But we'd only actually ordered like 20 of them. The government turned around and adds another order of about another 27, and suddenly people are going, we're only going to buy 48. And you sort of go, we only had 21 ordered. We've ordered 27 more. Why? Because you don't order, because of the way the F-35 is ordered in sort of batches and everyone orders a few in the batch, you wouldn't... What were you expecting? We're expecting British government to turn around and order, I don't know, 111 aircraft in one go. That wasn't going to happen. So why, when we had 21 aircraft, were you confident we were going to get 138? And now we've ordered 48. You now think we won't get any more aircraft other than the 48. It confuses me. It confuses me. Shomack, Fletcher would have killed for some British carriers at Guadalcanal. Fletcher would have probably found the British carriers at Guadalcanal trying to join the destroyers and do the attack. Let's be honest, this is the Royal Navy's armoured carriers. Even HMS Unicorn in the Korean War. Hello, I'm here to supply you with spare aircraft and occasionally just assist for a couple of days. Ooh! Shore bombardment! Whee! I've got 4-inch guns. What are you... This HMS, I think it was HMS Ocean, which was at the time, going, I'm the aircraft carrier here. What are you doing? And Unicorn's going, target, on land, me engage. Ocean's going, are you... Okay, we'll join in. This is... The Royal Navy carrier mentality is not perhaps the sanest thing or safest thing to have around for Guadalcanal and those kinds of fights. They would probably be getting stuck into them. There again, I think that's because the aircraft carriers heard that HMS Renown managed to chase off the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. And I think, therefore, the aircraft carriers decided, well, if the enemy capital ships are going to run from that scenario, we could chase them away. We're capital ships too. Yeah. Nick Ross, commemorative air forces fly all forces planes all fly, I believe. Usually do, yes. Danny Phillips, where's the Swordfish? Why do they order both? Why? Hi, Daniel Freeman. I hope work going well. Aviator Enterprise, a steerman. Attack Covert 4. Texas is one state with an official state militia that is not the National Guard. Is the one state with an official state militia that is not the National Guard. So they could decide to operate Swordfish if they so desired. That doesn't surprise me somehow about Texas. I do want to visit Texas though more and do some tourism there. They do have some excellent history preserved there. Death Squad, hopefully back from work as scheduled. Greg Southey, give Fletcher British carriers and tribals, plus Blankia. Yeah, then Fletcher would have a lot of fun. Or, alternatively, him and Philip Vian would both take a destroyer and see who could win the most. Big orders. Unicorn's captain doing the Nelson's blind eye with his orders. No, he's going in legitimate orders, waving the rules of engagement going around. We were fired upon first! We can fire back! The destroyers and escorting crews are sort of going, what the? This is what we're here for? No, we were the ones fired on. We'll fire back. I think also that's why, since then, the Royal Navy has undergunned its carriers to try and stop them getting involved in fights. That could actually... I'll have to bring this up in Bill Trumps. It's a legitimate idea. Is the reason Royal Navy carriers are undergunned these days because they don't want them getting involved in the fights that the World War II vintage ones did? Carmen, could we see HMS Queen Elizabeth fly off some swordfish for the 100th birthday of Swordfish FA sinking of Bismarck? That would be glorious. Jimmy, something's gone wrong if your carrier's in range of the enemy's guns. Something's gone wrong for your enemy when your carrier's guns are in range. Yeah. That's good. HMS Ocean, why is the more carrier closer to target than we are? HMS Unicorn, gun go bang, target go. HMS Ocean, better get closer. We never outlived the shame. No, they didn't. Only 1640. Oh, 40. So, have you heard about the Flying Heritage Collection, who have restored 2 Jumo 004 engines to flight-worthy condition, new turbine blades in modern lines and such? Yes, I've heard some fun things. There are lots of things going through at the moment. There's suddenly been a whole growth of people who have a lot of money who are interested in putting money into history, and it's wonderful. We're going to get all sorts of cool things coming back. 960. Oh yeah, and a 262 to put them on, which they intend to fly. I just wish they had Eric Winkle Brown around to fly it, because let's be honest, he's possibly the most experienced 262 pilot that there was, as I think he managed to clock up more hours in them than any other pilot did. Aviate Enterprise, if you ever come to Texas, I'd be happy to show you around, at least the DFLW area. Yeah, thank you. Dan Freeman, are aircraft carriers leading by example with their escorts? Possibly. Calm, the Captain and Queen Elizabeth will find some guns. Don't joke about that. The main reason I don't want to be the Queen Elizabeth class to be used as LPHs is because they're talking about taking the 105mm light guns on them. Seeing as the place they'll be stored is the hangar, that's only one short trip on a lift before you have 105mm mounted on the flight deck. And I'm fairly sure if a Queen Elizabeth class gets 105mm mounted on the flight deck, they will be using them. Carmen, do you think that when it's 100 years of the Fleet Air Arm or sinking of Bismarck, fly of Queen Elizabeth, it was 100 years of the Fleet Air Arm this year? The Fleet Air Arm became, the Royal Naval Air Service returned, Fleet Air Arm became part of the Navy again in 1939. So it was last year that was 100 years of the Fleet Air Arm. No, not 100 years, 80 years from the Fleet Air Arm last. So it went to 100 years, that's another 20 years on 19 years, so maybe then. Sorry. Math's going wrong. Might have heard some puppy squeakings down there. So I will. There's one more aircraft coming. We'll go through that, and then we'll probably call it a night. Calman, Dan Freeman, senior supply senior officer. Why was HMS Queen Elizabeth ordered lots and lots of F-35 gun pods? Captain HMS Queen Elizabeth. Right, lads and lasses. We mount the gun pods to give us a good broadside and then sail in close. Oh, God. TAC Covert 4. The reason Dr. Clark will never see his flak batteries on RN carriers. RN sees carrier captains again equipped with decent-sized gun batteries and deciding they're Nelson. That's good. I'm not sure about the lack of guns for modern RN carriers. They'll just try to use the close-in weapon system, and failing that, the GPMG on the bridge wings. Yeah, essentially. Who was pilot for the 262? Well, he's unfortunately dead, but Eric Winkle Brown. Greg's asking, Royal Artillery Battery arranged along the sides of the flight deck. Broadside is back. Yeah. Danny Holmes. Free British battle cruisers. Free British... The British didn't have... British only had 3 battle cruisers in World War II, and one of them survived, HMS Renown. So that could only be 2. 2 battle cruisers and a battleship all have apparently had their wide turrets explode in World War II, according to Danny Phillips. Nicolas, not 105s, 155s. I don't think the AS-90s are part of the Commando battle group, and I don't think they could be launched by helicopter. And seeing as they don't have a ramp to get them off, I don't think they'd be put on the carriers. Carl Gaswood, can you include the junior Fluffy Research Assistant 2 in live if he's arrested? Maybe on Sunday. Maybe for brew ships. An advantage of the QE class working with the USMC is that they have the M77 lightweight 155mm gun. Well, if you have the US Marine Corps along, that's a different matter. 1940. So, did you ever see the earlier comment review why the Ratopods called JATO? Yeah, but it basically skipped past me. And this is the last aircraft today, the Fairey Seafox. I wanted to bring this up because, they got back to form. RTW2. Dan Frim. Also, I'm pretty sure Winkle Brown would be a better pilot than me, despite a mild case of death. Potentially, but, I have faith in you, Daniel. I'm sure you could do quite well. Right. Inca, are you planning a Fairey Part 2 workshop? Well, there might be a whole load of recorded videos coming out on Saturday. And, Rule the Waves too. It's a game. Man 6240. Do you have any idea why they were called JATO when they were rockets? Oh, I've forgotten it now, but I did once write a paper on it, so I'll have a look at paper on it. I'll look it up. Yeah. Meet the Fairey Seafox, the light scout plane which operated from HMS Emerald, Neptune, Orion, Ajax, Arethusa, Penelope, Pretoria, Castle, Asturias, and Alicante. And as you can guess, she was the scout. This is the aircraft which was involved at the Battle of the River Plate. Very small plane. All up weight, 5,420 pounds, or just under 2.5 tons. Had a maximum capacity of 96 imperial gallons. Was powered by one 395 horsepower Napier Rapier air-cooled piston engine, which looks interesting. And yeah, fairly good little aircraft. And that's your spotter aircraft for your light cruisers. And it's a cool one. Now, the recorded videos will include as extra the Albacore, the Fulmar, the Barracuda, and the Firefly, because I feel that they should be added in as extra. But they're not going to be in the live because I worked out that live was probably going to take long enough as it is without those 4 added in. And as I said, Puppy's back from vets, and whilst I've seen him quickly, I haven't managed to give him much of a cuddle. So, I want to go check on him. Come on, Doctor, what scares me so much about HMS Queen Elizabeth finding guns is I'm sure the captains would never... what scares you so much about HMS Queen Elizabeth finding guns? I'm sure the captains would never do such a thing. I have met pretty much every officer who has been a commanding officer of Queen Elizabeth or Prince of Wales since they come into service. There are 2 I haven't met, and the rest I have met in things over the years. Some when they were much more junior than they are now. And I can say without a doubt that I am sure every single one, if they found guns, would be using them. Aviator Empress. It stood for Jet Assisted Takeoff, but they were rockets. Nico Ross. Which, in your opinion, had a greater effect on World War II? Swordfish or SBD? Probably the Swordfish, just for the sheer amount of places it gets and the sheer amount of stuff it does. Because it serves the whole way through the war from 1939 to 1945. It does the whole war, and it serves in every theatre of war. You find Swordfish turning up. So I'd say that due to sheer number and presence. Monday 16 and 40. Continue live while cuddling? No, he's not going to come out of his pen. He's in a nice big pen downstairs to look after him and give him sort of space and protect him while he's getting better. So I have to go down to him. Kahaman, let's be real. They have guns and Chinooks. They're going to strap guns to the Chinook. They might have already tried that in the past. Ian Carr, H16 air-cooled inline engine sounds like an engineering challenge. It was fun to maintain. He doesn't have a cone on his neck. No. I have posted a picture of him in the community, saying hello to the fluffy research assistant. So, alright, any last questions? And then we'll call it the night. Thank you very much to everyone for being here. And as always, if you have liked, please do subscribe. Please do press like. Thank you very much for the super chats. They were exceedingly generous tonight. Not sure why the Blackburn inspires such generosity. Slightly worrying, but thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope you've had a good evening. Hope you enjoyed. Greg Salsi, the fun fact, the reason the JPL is called the JPL is because that's the lab which developed the JATO. Mainly, yes, but also that was the lab where they had a whole load of people who were basically blowing stuff up, and instead of kicking them out of university, they bought them a farm and told them to carry on blowing stuff up. Tom Sandoval, again, very good, Dr. Clark. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dutchman. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Melanie1640. Thank you, Carl Harmon. Carl Government. Thank you. Thanks, St. Kitts. Thank you, Nicole Ross. Thank you, Abazaski. Thank you, DGV40. Thank you, everyone. It's very kind of you. And sorry about the issues we had at the beginning. Thank you, Howard Maskey, and Senpai, and DeCasso. Thank you. Take care, and thank you very much again. US Envoy. I hear the Germans are experimenting with jets. Crazy. Will never work. UK Envoy. Oh, yes. Would you like to see ours? Yeah, that was fun. Thank you, Osprey28. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Thomas Vanderveld. And Yogi Khan. Take care.